Good morning and welcome to the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services for Friday, January 10, 2025. Welcome back. Happy New Year's to everybody. I am City Councillor Vivian Santos, your chairperson, together with Councillor Matt Allard from St. Boniface, Councillor Dobson from St. James, and Councillor Gilroy from, Daniel Mac. We also have members from the Winnipeg Public Service, Peter Prinsu, our senior committee clerk, and some other members from the public admin. I want to acknowledge that we are meeting here on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional homelands of the Red River Métis that I have the privilege of living on. Also want to acknowledge our ancestral territory lands and that our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake Band number 40 in Treaty 3. Together with our neighbors in Treaty 5, where our hydroelectricity comes from. Moving on,
I move that the minutes of November 28th be taken as read and confirmed.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that's carried. I believe we have some delegations that had registered after the fact. Do we also need a motion to accept the addendum reports?
We do.
Okay, so maybe I'll go to Councillor Allard to move a motion to suspend the rules to allow 2 new addendum reports, one Nature Smart Climate Solutions and Millennium Library Community Connection Space. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All that's carried. And then I believe we have some speakers who have registered or would like to register to speak after the fact. I need someone to suspend the rules to allow additional delegations. Councillor Gilroy moves that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that's carried unanimously. All right, Peter, if you could lead us the way, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Perfect. First up in delegation, we have Bruce Rose, the Executive Director of Swim Natation Manitoba Association Inc., to be heard with respect to Report 4. If Bruce is here, we'll ask him to have a seat at the end of the table there, and you'll have up to 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Good morning.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And I believe you're also newly appointed Executive Director for Swim Nation.
I am, yeah. So I did start in the spring of 2024.
Okay, excellent. Welcome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And my condolences. No, congratulations.
No, not at all. So I've just written a few things just to share with respect to item number 4. So my name is Bruce Rose and I'm the Executive Director for Swim Manitoba. So I'd like to thank the committee members for the opportunity to be here and to provide information as needed. I would also like to thank the City of Winnipeg team for their hard work and passion with respect to the reports presented. The process has been transparent and collaborative, so thank you very much. On behalf of the Swim Manitoba Board of Directors, operational team, clubs, and general membership, we support the reports as submitted and the recommendations noted under item number 4. Competitive swimming in Manitoba is a growing sport, and access to the Pan Am pool and the training tank has been a vital part of that growth. There are many benefits to swimming. However, the impact of this lease agreement will ensure access to adequate pool space to build healthy programming and in turn healthy communities, build communities working in cooperation, community working together to promote health, fitness, and teamwork among our youth, showcasing the Pan Am pool as an international venue to host competitions and generating revenue for the City of Winnipeg far beyond the impact of this lease agreement, enhance the City of Winnipeg's image as a significant supporter of swimming, not only in Manitoba, but across the country and internationally. In general, new clients, new customers, new business for the City of Winnipeg. To help support the growing need of infrastructure at the Pan Am pool, Swim Manitoba has also taken the following steps to generate a cash reserve specific to the training tank over the next 5 years, a competition levy at all swim meets hosted at Pan Am pool, a membership levy for all supporting Swim Manitoba members and clubs, a National Sport Trust Fund project so donors can access a charitable tax receipt for their donation, with the project supporting the purchase of equipment and technology to allow for continuous improvements for the facility, as well as provide financial support to a feasibility study that will help decision makers determine how increased capital investments at the Pan Am Pool will support increased usage of the facility. We also have committed to a review of our financial reserve to earmark growing funds for the future for the training tank and Pan Am Pool, and also doing aggressive investigation of other funding programs and grants to support the training tank. So together, we are positive that we will have a positive impact in the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Going to councillors, any questions?
I have a few questions.
Sure.
So, Madam Chair, to the delegation, thank you very much for being here today. I'm interested in a number of things. Who are your members? How many might there be? What is criteria of membership? Can anyone participate? What are the average fees or I don't know, a few examples of fees in order to participate? Does the organization pay any towards deferred maintenance of the pool? I understand it's in the millions of deferred maintenance in terms of upgrades that need to be done. And I've heard that your group will be involved in creating an estimate or a document to look at what the pool might look like in the future. And I guess that might be an in-kind contribution to a capital program. That might be a different way of putting it. And so there's a few questions on the floor. Maybe you want to cherry pick or
A lot of
maybe
questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions.
some, all of them.
I lost count at 10.
I don't know, 10.
Okay, so our membership, we're at around 2,400 as a membership, and we do have around 22 supporting clubs that participate in access in the training tank, as well as other pools across the city and throughout Manitoba. So that answers that. So membership fees vary. So we as a provincial sport organization charge a membership fee to be part of the provincial sport organization. The clubs offer or charge membership fees, which are specific to the operations of that club. And so to give you a specific number on that, that would be challenging because it would vary per club and what pool they access and what part of the province that they live in. I could get that information to you, but it varies as some individuals that are looking to be competitive swimmers may only practice 1 or 2 days a week, where others may practice every day of the week, right? To get ready for competitions and meets. So the value of that membership varies drastically, right? Depending on the commitment that that athlete and family are willing to commit. We are doing some investigation. So a lot of the other things that I've added after the fact. So to be honest with you, I'm new to this role. So it's only been around 6 or 7 months. And so I had lots of great conversations with the City of Winnipeg team to kind of go over, where the lease agreement originally came from. So that was 25 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong. And then most definitely coming to the table again to renegotiate this lease agreement. And so we do realize that we are receiving a reduced rate for this pool space, but most definitely we're trying to take the steps to actually generate some revenue, a reserve where we can support initiatives and purchases at the Pan Am Pool. So off the top of my head, most definitely in the training tank, we are in desperate need of a new bulkhead. And so quotes coming in, we're looking at $500,000 for a new bulkhead. And so really we as a membership organization, a lot of the things that we will be focusing on over the next 2 to 5 years is generating capital to help support purchase that. In speaking with the City of Winnipeg team, I know down the road they had recommended that, or there is on the table a feasibility study that might be happening with respect to the Pan Am Pool. So we most definitely would like to generate some revenue to support that. Keeping in mind, I know those studies sometimes cost millions of dollars. We are a small not-for-profit, so we will not be able to afford that, but most definitely try our best to generate some capital to support that in partnership with the city of Winnipeg.
Okay, just a few follow-ups, Madam Chair. Sure. So you've recognized that the city is, I think your words were, we are paying less than it costs. Do you know how much that less than it costs is? I've got a pretty good idea, having dealt with pools extensively in St. Boniface and in Winnipeg in terms of their budgets, but do you know roughly how large the subsidy is from the city of Winnipeg to your organization by allowing access to the sites? And the second question was the bulkhead at $500,000. Is that something that is it a nice to have, or is it something that is essential to the operations of a pool?
Yeah, so I am aware of the discount, but I would rather leave that up to the city to share that information. One thing I do want to mention is that we also pay other expenses outside of the lease agreement. So for lifeguards, for the second lifeguards, we are charged the going rate for that. And so we do pay for that as well. So there's other things that we do pay for outside of this lease agreement. But with the discount, I'm aware of it, but I don't want to go on record. So I would leave that up to the city of Winnipeg to share that information. And the bulkhead, I think, is really integral to competition in Manitoba. And so the bulkhead is there to change the pool layout from short course to long course. And so most definitely, as we look through the fiscal year of competition, we are running short course competition meets and long course competition meets. But for international or national events, we would need to have the training tank at a long course setup. It also kind of helps with the training component of it. So short course, we're able to get more people in the pool, so more access to the pool. So yeah, it's not really a wish thing. There is a bulkhead there right now. And every time that it's moved, it's like we're holding our breath to make sure that it doesn't get stuck, right? And so it's integral to the work that we do and for the meets that we host there, plus the training and the development of athletes here in Manitoba.
Okay, and finally, just one very straight up binary question. Are you in favor of the lease agreement as proposed by the city of Winnipeg that we have?
Yes, we are.
All right,
I
like to have that answer because it makes things very clear when we're voting on it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of questions. The first one, do you currently have a lease at that facility from the city of Winnipeg?
I don't know if I should defer to the city staff for that.
Sometimes
It's an extension.
Renewal.
All right, so this one is 20 years. And that's quite a long lease.
Correct.
So that says a lot that your group is important to the city of Winnipeg, that we would sign a lease for that length of time. So that's a very positive thing from the city of Winnipeg to promote swimming. I think that's great. As for the storage and PA system and the timing board and all that, is that something that you currently use now?
Exactly, we do. We're using that on a regular basis, yes, for our needs. Yeah.
I think this is a very good lease for a very good purpose.
Thank you. And we're very thankful.
Can I get one more time? Just
one more.
I heard swimming is on the rise. That's encouraging. It's interesting. Do you have any more information to that effect? That there's more and more demand for swimming or more and more swimmers? I thought you said something along those lines.
Yeah, most definitely. We're seeing an increase in our membership. And so we're always having new clubs reach out. I guess the one thing, and I'm sure as you sit here on this community services board, you realize that there is a max to the amount of people that can access services here in the city, right? And so if we were to have an influx of 5,000 new swimmers, that would be challenging for us to fit them into the pool. But I think that's just a reality for any city, right? Is there's that there's that need or people are interested, but is there enough facility infrastructure for us to meet that need? Typically what happens after the Olympic year, and so we were super successful as a sport at the Summer Olympics, there's always that interest in new membership. And so we are anticipating our membership to grow around 15 to 17% this coming year.
Do you mean how many people?
Well, we're currently at 2,400, so 15% of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. No, these are great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for presenting.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time.
That's it for delegations on that have registered.
That's right. And so next we have Kate Kaler, who I believe would like to speak in support of report 7, which is
Okay.
Millennium Library Community Connection Space.
Sounds good. Excellent. Welcome, Kate. How are
Thank
you?
you. Good. Happy 2025, everybody. Thank you for agreeing to suspend the rules on this issue. You're not going to get as many speakers as we had hoped today, so I think I may be the only one speaking to this. So we won't hold you up too long on this, but we didn't want to let this opportunity go by. So I do, of course, obviously I'm here in support of the motion. We want community connection page to be opened and as soon as possible. I do, of course, want to acknowledge the record spending on libraries of late. It is most welcome, but the long drought means that there's still much more work to do, and closing community connections is a step in the wrong direction. I'm representing one of the organizations that began organizing when the metal detectors, etc., were first introduced at Millennium in 2019. As far as I know, no other library in Canada has taken this approach. We do have a crime problem in Winnipeg, but so do other cities. But other cities have not chosen to overinvest funds in ineffective and even harmful security measures in response. I say ineffective as I have frequently pointed out at committee and other meetings, that a weapon does not need to be made of metal in order to do damage to somebody. I also say harmful because we know that there are reported incidents of intimidation and racial profiling in the bag search component of that approach. While efforts were made to mitigate this and try different security companies, we are now back to the original Garda company, and I, as someone who still sits on the community committee that works with Millennium Library staff on safety for everyone at the Millennium, have no information that things will be different this time around. Additionally, many newcomers to Canada find employment in security work, as it is a relatively low barrier to employment with very little training. Too many of Winnipeg's inhabitants are struggling to survive, and unfortunately, we know that Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in poverty. Having newcomer security guards policing and acting as a barrier to Indigenous community members can all too often perpetuate the negative perceptions and feelings some members in all communities have about each other. And given the growing anti-immigrant sentiment and the ongoing backlash against truth and reconciliation in Canada, these communities need bridges built and not chasms created. Through our Campaign 2000 Child and Family Poverty Report Card that you were all sent a recent copy of, we know that in 2022, 42% of children in Winnipeg Centre lived in poverty. There is no reason to believe that the situation has improved since then. Winnipeg Centre remains the urban federal riding with the highest rates of child and family poverty. The harmful effects of poverty on childhood development and how it blunts their futures are proven, and all we need to do is look around our city to see the results. That the systems that were created to help are riddled with racism is also not in question. The data of who's involved with CFS and justice, who's expelled more often and does not graduate school, who's done harm in the healthcare system, etc., all prove this. Community Connections was a concrete example of how the city is trying to live up to its chartered responsibilities to look after the health and well-being of all of its inhabitants. You have the data on its success. There have been countless presentations at this committee level, at Executive Policy Committee, at Council on what the good work that Community Connections does. A recent report let you know that 45% of requests at Millennium Library were handled by Community Connections staff. That's over 7,000 people received help because of Community Connections. I do need to also point out that the community safety hosts, there is a duplication in services with the regular security guard and community safety hosts. They have 3 times, they have the same training as a traditional security guard does, but they have 3 times more than that. So if there is money on the table, then perhaps that would be something to look at. The Millennium Library staff recognize and support the Community Connection space. The library board supports it, and community organizations obviously support it as well. And yet a proven success is closed while, say, the transit security force, without any publicly available data, except some claims of saving the city money by denying people a ride on the bus, is being expanded. obviously, no money is saved through that program because the cost of transit is the same. You just haven't let somebody who needed to get somewhere on the bus. And of course, that program is costing millions. I wanted also to point out that, you know, what we hear through various sources is that there is a concern that the city does not want to move into the social service delivery. That is a push against the community connection space. The city does do social services. First of all, you are mandated to do it through the charter responsibilities, but at the same time you do it. But the approach that we have with the city right now is it's done really through enforcement as opposed to a stick approach with the Winnipeg Police Service. They in fact insist that they do social services, they do outreach, they do community, they connect people and that sort of thing. And I don't doubt that some do. However, the issue is that it's always done with a stick as opposed to a carrot. And we know that usually a carrot is more effective and is certainly more humane. So we have calls. So I won't go on to that normal rant, but what I would just like to close in saying is that again, community connection space has proven to be successful. It is an investment in what works as opposed to what doesn't work. So we're really hoping that you actually approve this today and show a commitment towards it. And we'll continue to argue effectively in the budget process as it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of, because I know that we had to actually close the library for some time due to really staff issues, like really concern regarding the safety of staff. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your conversations with staff and why they feel this helps is what is needed to support their feeling of safety at their workplace?
The information that I have is through that the community committee. And so I'm going, and perhaps Karen will speak more to that because they have more specific examples than I do. And unfortunately, some of the other speakers who couldn't make it today have more of those examples, the people who actually work in the library who do support it. But what I can tell you is this is what I have heard, is that there was some trepidation to begin with. It's absolutely true that there are some library staff that do not want to see the traditional security guards go. I have to acknowledge that. But they also do recognize the value of the community safety host approach and the community connections. They know that people are not coming through their doors, or they're coming through their doors de-escalated, and then they are better able to help them in their traditional library services. But of course, library services are being delivered directly in the community connection space as well. And so some people don't even have to go into the main library.
And can you just talk a little bit more about kind of the training that the staff gets that work in the community connection space? I know that people say, well, why not downtown safety partnership or other programs, but like they get specialized training is what I understand. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll leave to the library staff what special training that they get. I don't have that, but what I can speak to is the community safety host program. And that is that the idea is that they do the same 40-hour training that a traditional security guard gets, but they also do the extensive de-escalation training, and their approach, their mindset is one that they're just the way they present themselves is different than a security guard with a vest and that intimidating posture that they all take. That is really unfortunate. That just ends up escalating people. But their approach, just in their basic uniform with sweatshirts and t-shirt, that sort of thing, and a lanyard, but they do have the effective de-escalation training. And again, the data that they present proves that.
Okay, perfect. The reason why I want to ask a few more questions because I don't think we have anyone else on here.
I'll do my best to answer them.
But just in terms of the services and support that you know that maybe the community connection offers that they can't just kind of get anywhere, and maybe why it's important to have it maybe just outside the library versus supports inside the library. Can you talk maybe a little bit about that?
Well, I can talk about just the barrier that security is. I mean, I'm like a white middle class lady, but I don't enjoy going through it.
Yeah.
It's not, and for some people who don't feel that they have agency and things like that, and I have been treated rudely by the security guards as well, but I'm somebody who can blow it off or call them on it because I have agency. Some people don't, and they simply will look at that and they won't walk in the door. So we're actually saying that library is not welcoming to me and I don't want to be there. So the community connection space is just off to the side. It's a space that they can go sit at and get the help that they need to there. So I'm just saying that my main point is the security is a barrier.
Madam Chair? Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
oh yeah, go ahead, Councillor Lord.
Through you, I'm new to this committee, so I missed much of the firsthand accounts and presentations. Would you mind giving like a history of your perspective in terms of what's happened here and what's happening? And I mean, I think I hear what you hope to happen, but would you mind sharing with the committee and in particular with me, who hasn't been part of many of these debates?
I'll try to do it fast, but I will go back to 2019. The community, it was a whiplash effect where all of a sudden there was a security guard, there was a gate, and there were bag searches happening, and people were looking around and people were calling each other going, what is happening here? What happened? What happened that this has now been put in place? We did speak to Ed Cuddy at the time, and he had just said that, weapons had been found. There certainly had been incidents. I'm not denying any of that. But on the advice of the Winnipeg Police Service, they decided to institute this, and it was a full-on bag check and just stopping people from actually entering the library. So that was the starting point. And of course, community got together and organized, had good long conversations. You saw that part. Okay, so you don't need that history. Okay. So, but obviously there was the pandemic, that sort of thing, but library and community got together and started to work on that together on what's the best approach. And so that conversation led to what had been that somewhat coffee shop sort of thing space being turned into a hub for community organizations and for people to receive library services. So and it worked. We celebrated its opening. It was a huge step forward for the city. And we always knew the funding was precarious. And we always know there's the tug of war between the province and the city about who pays for what. But again, as you've heard me say far too many times, you do have an obligation to do this. And if there is money to be spent, why not spend it on an approach that actually works?
And Madam Chair, through you to the speaker, the delegation, how much money do you believe is
$614,000
over 1 year?
per year.
1 year?
Yes, per year.
And that's all operating funding?
That is all operating funding along with the community safety host. I'm looking at the city staff to, yes.
And the space itself is not requiring any additional, there's sort of deferred maintenance? Is there other costs that are capital related?
Well, there's going to be the library restructuring, but that's separate as far as I know. But again,
we often forget that part of it when we talk about leases.
Mhm.
Hence my questions to the previous delegation. Okay.
And this is a did you know question. Did you know, because I just found this out, that actually we've been touting this across the country. Like we have gone and shared with other libraries how good the service is working and how it's actually working for the city. So we actually been touting it as a success story and actually sharing it with other libraries across the country on the importance of programs like this, and other people are in awe of us for having this kind of program. So are you aware that we're doing that as a city?
yes, I am. And, we just had and I didn't have a chance to look at it, but we just had that report of the most livable cities. I don't know if anybody where Winnipeg is ranking right now. I would need to look into that. But yes, I am aware of it. And I just wanted to add to that. The idea that, again, there are certain folks who will say that it's not really providing library services. So I just want to make that point again, that these are library services. As I said, way back in 2019, I'm old enough to remember prior to Google. And I remember the conversation when Google came in and people said, well, that's it for libraries. We're never going to need a library again. And what did libraries do? They adapted. And that's what good programs do, is they adapt to changing times and they meet more needs. And they're meeting more needs than ever now.
Google is definitely not a library.
No, it's scarier than ever. Now that AI is there, it's terrifying.
I did have some questions. You made some comments. I wrote them down here. Duplication of services by community services and security guard. You zoomed by it really quickly. So could you talk about that again? What did you mean by duplication of services by a community or by the community safety hosts?
This would be my opinion. I want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for the community safety host program on this, but in my world, if you've got one person who's got 3 times the training of another person, why not invest in that? More in that than have both of them there, because they both have the same training. It's just one has more.
Okay. So you're saying the community safety host has more training?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I think it's Yeah, three times more training.
Okay, so from my understanding, through having a discussion earlier in the Christmas holiday, like before last year, and these committee members were not here. And I don't think you came out in delegation in November, December, when we were talking about it. But are you
Yeah.
aware that the community safety host program is continuing on? It's like the physical space is closing, but the community safety hosts and the community crisis workers are still continuing on.
Yes, but they are behind the barrier.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Okay, and so,
Yes.
um,
And we're glad that the community safety hosts are going to other libraries. I mean, obviously, that's a good step forward, and we think this should be changing the security industry.
okay. And so, so what you're suggesting is that the front of the library, so instead of them being behind the barrier, they should, or inside the library, they should be stationed in the lobby area or in the community connection space.
Preferably in the community connection space, because that's also then a space that's not just people lined up in the lobby waiting for a service. There's a place for them to be. So, and I realize there've been changes in the community connection space. And I would prefer that we actually went back to the original format where it was more wide open. But the fact of the matter is, as I'm told, is that they were just being overwhelmed by calls for service. So there's been so it's not as, it's not, you know, and again, I'll let Karen speak to this more than this, but they have had to limit the number of people who could be there at one time. So if there was more money on the table, I would prefer that we went back to the old way where there was coffee and granola bars and all of that sort of thing, because that assists people in getting through their day and it does de-escalate people.
Madam Chair, now you've prompted other questions.
Okay, yeah, go right ahead.
I didn't want to cut you off either. If you have one. So I've heard that the staffing component is remaining intact. However, the staffing would be behind a barrier. So that leaves me the question, what is the $640,000 annual operating for in the end if the staffing is still there, albeit behind the space?
Yeah, my question for the administration, but if.
And if I'm misquoting the number, my apologies.
No, the 614, you said 40,
614.
614.
Okay.
They are, but yeah, they are redeployed. It was the QP was able to negotiate a redeployment part, is my understanding of what happened with that, with staff, but that is the issue, is they are behind the barrier of security.
Okay, so just going back, so there were $614,000 in staff. One of those were a staff person who's now behind the barrier. We
More
know,
than one, I'm gonna let,
I'll total
yeah.
of 10.
so 10
Yeah.
staff are behind the barrier.
Okay.
So like, what's the delta?
What's that mean?
Well, what's okay, so there's a certain amount of the program that remains.
Yes,
But the
correct.
program is remaining behind
Yes,
the barrier.
correct.
And so how much is missing on the side of the barrier?
I don't know the full
I
amount.
see the
Yeah,
hands are going up for the public service, but okay, perhaps I
They'll
can
get their
wait.
opportunity.
Perhaps, but
Yeah,
but
they'll
to
have
the
their
delegation, do you have an idea or do we wait for the public service?
No, because I'm gonna just give you a very soft answer on that, is like libraries need more funds, not less. So I'm hoping not for a negotiation that the space will be reopened for less money or something like that. I'm not sure that's what you're proposing, Counselor. That's not what I mean. But I just think that we're still short-staffed within our libraries. And so the additional full fund should be restored, and then the library will be able to deploy their staff as they see fit.
Okay, I'm not quite following, but perhaps I will.
I think I can't answer the question.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
wait for the administration. They.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for King? No? Yeah,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm, after that little round of questions, so we have staff outside the barrier, outside the library per
When
se?
community connection space is opened, they operate from.
Outside the library,
Yeah.
library actual grounds.
So somebody does not have to actually go through the metal detector and have their bag searched.
So they don't have to go into the rest of the library.
If they don't choose to, they can get there
So
immediately
it's
met at.
a separate, it's like a separate place.
Yep, just outside, just in the library, in the lobby of the library.
It's in the lobby of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. I'm sure we'd be happy to take you on a tour if you're.
I've been.
You've
there
been, okay, all
many
right,
times,
okay, good.
But I
Okay.
just want to make it clear that it's not actually in the library.
No.
It's on the outskirts of the library. So they're just using our space.
Yes.
That's good.
And that, who is they? Yes, so the $640,000 is staff that is currently no longer in that space that has been redeployed throughout the system.
No,
Okay.
no,
I'm gonna wait. Okay.
Wait,
I will wait.
yeah. We can get clarity from library services.
Thank
Okay, yeah. I think that's it for questions. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, Kate, really appreciate
Thank you all
that.
very much. Appreciate your time.
Peter, I think you sent me a message that we do have one more delegate.
I
that
did
had-
receive an email, however, I have not provided a link. The person's not in the Zoom meeting right now. So to facilitate that would require probably a good 5 to 10 minutes from now.
Oh, okay, okay. Just looking at the time, just seeing that there's no other delegations,
Other delegates.
no other delegations, no?
What is the delegation regarding?
It's regarding the same matter.
Can we deal with that later in the agenda?
We could, do we do that?
I would recommend that we take a break now if it is the
Okay.
will of the committee to hear one more delegation. And then we can get that lined up and come back and finish delegations before I move into reports.
take a break.
Sure, coffee break, sure, we can take a 5-minute coffee break.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning and welcome back to the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services. We had to take a slight recess to allow some technical issues for someone coming online. Okay, I believe we have, do we need to do another motion to allow?
No, that's
No,
okay.
we've done that already?
No.
Okay. So this is one more delegation to speak on item number 7,
Yes.
Millennium Library Community Connection Space. I believe we have Dr. Joe Cornell online. Hi, doctor, how are you?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for accommodating this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, we are set to go. You've got 10 minutes. Go right ahead.
Okay, and I'll let you know, there are other people who had signed on who are also trying to do remote stuff. So hopefully that can be accommodated as well. My name is Dr. Joe Curnow. I am a faculty member at the University of Manitoba, and I am one of the authors of the 2019 report on security and safety in Millennium Library. That report now feels like a very long time ago, and I wasn't sure that I would be able to speak, so I just have really loose notes to share with you, and I might be able to speak to some of the questions that were raised in the previous delegation. So I just want to give a short history of the community connection space. So it comes out of really extensive research around the question of how do we keep libraries safe, and how do we deal with the increased numbers of incidents and escalated situations that happen in urban libraries. We know from research across the country that that is a fairly common occurrence. And as Kate Kaler said before, our library system has been the only one in the country and one of, I think, very few in North America that has responded with the securitization in the ways we have. And so what the research has told us is that actually securitization increases escalation. It increases the amount of tension that people have. And so when there are incidents, rather than meeting people and de-escalating it, using the kinds of strategies that social services use across the city, it escalates it. It makes things actually feel far more stressful to the people who are in that space, and certainly for the people who are being in conflict with security or with police in the space. It makes the consequences far more dire. And so what instead the research shows is very effective is community-led safety strategies, things that use the tools of community outreach to de-escalate, to meet people where they're at. We did a really extensive report, as I said, and I can send it to everyone again. I know, Councillor Santos, you have it already and have heard me talk about it a zillion times. But the things that have been effective for people are like having coffee, having granola bars. They seem silly, and I know some counselors are skeptical, but the research is really clear that those kinds of gifts, those kinds of meeting people's needs actually brings the temperature down in the library from the start, and so it's really effective. The other things that make it really, the community connection space really effective, that again comes out of research, is that often we need a space of de-escalation. And so in this way, the community connection space is actually a core piece of the safety strategy linked to community safety hosts. So community safety hosts are doing incredible work. There's really good emergent research about how they're having really important impact and changing the kind of culture of safety in the library. We can speak to that if that's helpful to you. But basically, the community connection space serves as a hub for them. So if someone is in a library and is a little bit escalated, community safety hosts have a space where they can take the person out of the stressful situation and bring them to the connection space to, again, like have a conversation, to figure out what's going on and what they need. So rather than like kicking people out or like banning them and escalating them, which like makes it feel really stressful for everyone in the library, this gives a space for folks to go down and deal with that. And so we can't really take that out without really undermining a lot of the work of the community safety hosts, because otherwise they just become fancier and I think nicer security guards. Like they need a space where they can work from to do the kind of relationship-based interventions and meeting folks' needs. Now, when I say meeting folks' needs, I don't mean providing social services. And I know this has been a question over multiple years of delegations, and we've spoken about this extensively, and librarians have spoken about this. So the work that they're doing in this space is actually providing a core library service. So there's the community safety host who use the space as part of the safety strategy. And then there's the librarian team that uses the space to provide low barrier access to services. So I think sometimes people are like, oh, they're actually doing social service work, but they're really not. They're doing the same kind of work you would do at the reference desk, but they're providing it in a way that is more attuned to what is sometimes higher needs populations, but it's often not. And that's, I think, another misconception, that it's just people in crisis using the space. The data that comes out quarterly has shown us that that's really not the case. So it's not a social service. People are coming in and getting access to library services. And that is also playing a really important role for the rest of the library in like reducing the load. And I think the last quarterly report that came out really shows us this in terms of the data, where the number of questions, the types of questions that are being asked in community connection space is really an important, it's an important valve for like where the vast majority of questions in the library are actually being handled. And so if community connections is closed, it actually doesn't mean that those folks who are accessing community connections stop coming to the library. In fact, it just means that the rest of the library then has to absorb a huge volume of reference requests. So for folks who have the idea that like a library is a particular kind of space for particular kind of people, I very much disagree with that framing. And I think the research on community-led librarianship does as well. But for those folks who are animated by those concerns, what you should know is that every time, if we close a community connection space, then like any kind of high needs library user is going to be in the space. And so if you are made uncomfortable from those folks, then like having the community connection space is a really important diversion that keep any kind of high needs user from using that space. And so I think like there's this really interesting thing for staff who are a little bit worried about higher needs users, where they're actually going to have to deal with a lot more, and those interactions are far more likely to become stressful for workers or for other community members. And so it is an important place. I think the last piece I think I want to say, like one question that I've gotten over the years quite a bit is like, could it be an outside space? Could we move community connections outside the library because we want to keep the library for quote unquote traditional users? I think there is a significant human rights complaint rested in that, and a concern in terms of meeting the city charter. But that aside, from the research, what I want to say is that we cannot move this outside and have it play the same role, because the role of meeting the needs of the users who are already in the space, who are entitled to the space, is, I think, really crucial. And again, this is the place where Millennium Public Libraries are receiving national recognition in a good way, whereas when we did the securitization, we saw international backlash against it. Community Connections is the space that is celebrated, and we really need to support library workers, library admin in keeping that going, and I think, you know, investing in it and promoting it as a model, because that's what other library systems are talking to our admin about nationally. It can't be an outside space because it doesn't accomplish the key goals around security. It doesn't accomplish the key goals around meeting people's like user needs for information, and it doesn't actually, it makes the library less safe. And so I know that that is a key concern for many of you. And so if you care about the safety in the library, the community connection space needs to stay funded and it needs to stay open. Displacing it or closing it actually undermines a lot of the work that has been done over the last 3 or 4 years to change the relationships in community and to change the culture of safety, which again, the research on community-led librarianship and safety in libraries shows that that shift is one of the most important indicators for thinking about safety in libraries long-term. I'm really happy to talk more about the research in this area and also the experience from the community working group, which I've also been part of. But maybe I should stop here.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Any questions? I do have some follow-up questions, but if anybody else has questions, no. Thank you, Doctor. Really appreciate your perspective on things. I always have a much respect for that, and I do. I'm having a hard time understanding, and I think you kind of mentioned it already in your speech, that we want to provide the service outside of the library and not inside the library, but yet inside the library is where we want to provide the service. So I'm having a hard time. Is it one? Is it both? We want to do both. We want to do it inside the library because we have community safety hubs that are inside the library that could provide those services. Could we not?
I'm not sure I understand. So let me see if I do. And I think maybe it's just because we're talking about what's inside the library in different ways.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I have gotten over the years is, could we move community connection space off-site, outside of the building, to a different location downtown? And so that is for sure, I think, not tenable for any of the reasons that we want in terms of creating a space of safety, in terms of creating access to information for higher needs users in a low barrier way. Like that doesn't work.
Yeah, no, that's not what I was.
Yeah. So the question about like community connections. So the reason that it exists in the front lobby is partially because of space, right? That's where there was space available, but also because the security screening has continued. So as long as security screening is the reality for our library system, I think it creates a pretty significant barrier for many people, and it creates an escalated barrier. So one of the things that we hear from social service agencies through the community working group is that if you have newcomers who are overwhelmingly being sent to community connections to access IDs when there's providers who come in, or to figure out like, how do I navigate the system, which is what librarians are so good at helping people to do, the more barriers there are, the less likely people are to really get to pursue it. However, people do pursue stuff, like they do continue. And so what we're seeing in the few weeks, according to some staff, that Connections has been closed, is that people are still going in, but they're having a much harder time navigating. So they're not clear where to go. They're not clear who to talk to. And these users often, it's not a quick reference question, is my understanding. And staff can talk to this maybe more effectively than I can. But folks who are like accessing information around social services, housing, navigating things, it takes a lot longer. And so for reference workers, that means they are having to spend a bunch more time and do those engagements at the desk with a lot more people, where Community Connections, I think, is really set up to do those, to be in those kinds of conversations and to take the time. It is folks with special expertise often around working with newcomer communities or other low-income communities, and so they have just different expertise around stuff. You don't have that at the reference desk necessarily, and so then that makes things take even longer. Not that people can't figure it out, but you have a set of expertise in the workers who've been hired and who've been working in the community connection space. And if you give them the tools to do a really good job in the community connection space, then they do an excellent job. And we hear that again and again from different organizations across Winnipeg, that they are sending folks to Connections because it is a place that does really great work getting people access to the information that they need. And it just is less efficient, it is more cumbersome, and it is harder to navigate for users if it is inside the library. Does that help? I'm not sure if I answered your question.
A little, yeah, I think you did. I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding, like, I would think that inside the library, you would be offering the same library information or services inside the library, because there is the librarian and there is, we've hired the right staff, we've hired the community safety hosts to be inside the library, the community crisis workers are inside the library. So I guess I'm having a hard time differing between the two, because they are one and the same, similar, just one's physically outside in the lobby versus the ones that are inside the library.
So, okay, there's a few things that I have heard about this, and again, I hope that you will ask this to administration. So again, like what has been celebrated nationally about the community connection space is that it is a really intentional and evidence-based support system that is oriented to providing low barrier services. And I think what we know is that staff inside the library are extremely stretched. We've talked again and again about the need to essentially double the staffing in Winnipeg Public Libraries. The research on that is really clear. I hope that is a priority for upcoming budgets, because that is what will make the system safer overall and allow librarians to do the good work that they want to do. But what we know is that they're extremely overburdened and spread too thin. Whereas I think that has been a little bit different with the intensive staffing of the community connection space. So you have more staff who are able to spend more time and do a more effective job with users who need more and longer support. And not all of them do. Some of them are just quick, like in and out, trying to make a phone call. So I think that the ability to spend more time with users in navigating those information questions is really big. I think another thing that space has been doing is providing a venue for agencies to provide some of the information that they could provide. So that, again, like the ID clinics or tax preparation, community connection serves as a space for folks to do that. There's not an equivalent space in the library as far as I know, and some of the agencies aren't willing to go through the security services because they understand it as a particularly racialized set of barriers that are being created. And so I know for some organizations, and not all of them, they won't provide that access and that information within the security barriers. And then I was going to make one other point about it, but I've lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. I think Councillor Gilroy had a follow-up question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you. Just because I have been in the space several times when I've seen like the escalation occurred. So, and I do realize that there's other people kind of using the space that aren't in trauma or anything. I do know it's well used, but can you talk of maybe like, because I think there is like for other counselors maybe that aren't there that much, that have seen kind of the operations of it. Can you maybe explain why how like it can really de-escalate, because the clientele that you're seeing is not going to go away if we close this space. It's gonna, there they are, and why some of the clientele that maybe needs supports and services would be better off to use the space than going into the library, and how maybe that can disrupt what goes on in the library, maybe that might be helpful for us to understand why it's important for us to, where the de-escalation should occur and why that space is helpful for that de-escalation.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So you raised this, but just to be clear from the data from the city, the majority of people who are accessing the community connection space are not in crisis. And it's not even necessarily that people are high needs users. It is like the most popular point of contact because it is easy to get to and it is like friendly and lovely. So that said, for folks who are come into the library in an agitated space, and we know that that happens, or people who are in a moment of like real need, when they come in, there's two choices of what they can be met with. One is security guards going through your items and with different levels of scrutiny, and often for people who are in crisis, a lot of scrutiny, and being not always very kind. And often very racist. The research on this is pretty clear, and that's not specific to any specific security guard or even agency. It's just that we expect to see that behavior across securitization experiences. So they can get met with that, which like immediately elevates people's levels of agitation, right? When you get met with aggression, and then so you enter the library space like in not a great space. And so then when there's any kind of friction along the way, the printer doesn't work, there's not access to computers, people are much more likely to react in an elevated way. The community safety hosts are often there to meet that person and try to like move it down, which is great. It's so much better than it was a few years ago. And staff overwhelmingly say that they love the community safety hosts and they want more of them. So that's really good. And they're able to do it in the space of relationship. But like you're already in the library, you're already now like in a crisis, like where you're making a scene, and that feels stressful for everyone. You know, like I go to the library with my 3-year-old, or now 4, he just had a birthday. And like, if someone's in the space, he's going to be like, what's going on? So like, it is less stressful for everyone if that doesn't happen. So if the community safety host has a place where they can like physically take someone down to be in a different environment that doesn't have the trigger there, so they can go downstairs, and like have a conversation and figure out what someone needs, like see if they need a bus ticket or, a sandwich or whatever, you know, like community connections workers have lots of tools available, and the community safety hosts have lots of training in terms of like just having a conversation. And that's a lot of what they do, as I understand it. So if the person already is in the space and escalated, then it's like you already have an issue. Where the community connection space, because it's right at the door, it does a couple of things. One is it actually creates a totally different experience of welcome, rather than the kind of like introductory, like slamming you with like conflict. It is usually extremely friendly. The community safety host meets you there, gets your name, like has a little conversation with you, lets you know what kind of staff are available to like have a conversation with them, or if they just need to use the phone, like meet that need pretty quickly. So they're able to diffuse and create a sense of welcome. Some of the research from community-led librarianship shows that like having cookums in the library is this really great diffusion space where it just like brings the temperature down, like makes not everyone, but like lots of people feel like, okay, this is like a community space where I am actually supposed to be here, rather than with the security barriers where it's like, I'm not supposed to be here and they hate me and it's awful. And so for folks who are in crisis, having people able to like really intensively meet their needs in a contained space, where resources are available and where there is more staffing, is really useful, because it then keeps things from escalating, because you have a safety host there, you have library workers there who are trained and have like the skills and the practice of meeting those folks where they're at, right away. And so it really keeps the temperature down in the main library. And it is able to like actually solve some problems for the people who are coming in and having not a great day. And for staff, I think that's also really useful, because then it means that they know that those folks are still getting the access to resources, access to information that they need, but they're not coming in and finding the place in the library that is least attuned to them or least able to meet their needs. And then having to patch it up, but instead really able to use the resources that have been cultivated to support folks in this kind of space. And so it's really effective. And we see that in all of the data in terms of the kinds of volumes of questions that are asked and the numbers of escalated incidents that we're seeing in the rest of the library. When the community connection space is open, it's way down. And it's really interesting to see those links. And I think, you know, we're still waiting for longer term data on some of that. But the early indications from staff is that it's significant. Does that answer your question, Councillor Gilroy?
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Follow up? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Just got another message that we have someone that wants to speak to item number 6.
But is the will of the committee, Erna Buffy is in the waiting or is in the Zoom meeting and ready to go.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. Go ahead.
All right, Erna, if you want to start your video and unmute your mic, you'll have up to 10 minutes to speak to item 6.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, this caught me by surprise, but I'll keep it short. I'm sure most of you, sorry, I'm just going to plug my computer in.
Sure.
I'm
And then
sure most of you
can't see
received
you.
the letter I sent on December
We
5th.
also cannot see you. Can you turn on your video?
That's,
Perfect.
is that better?
Yes, excellent.
Great. So thanks a lot for allowing me to speak at the meeting. I had sent a letter on December 5th to a number of you that was signed not just by Trees Please, but CPAWS and Climate Reality Project, Manitoba Network, Eco Network, and Ours, encouraging Winnipeg to apply for Nature Smart funds. So we're very interested in the city exploring the possibility of applying to this particular fund to protect and expand our green spaces to ensure the city's climate resiliency and offset the impact of carbon emissions. As most of you probably know, meeting the 1.5 Celsius target globally by 2030 is looking less and less likely. So cities like ours need to act now to protect all the urban wild spaces we have and expand both green and blue spaces in areas where they're lacking. If our city has any hope of coping with escalating extreme weather, whether it's heat waves or superstorms. I recently met with members of the Western Nature Smart team that the money has been divided equally across the regions, and they're anxious to have Winnipeg to apply as soon as possible. As you know, even a sum as large as 1.4 billion, which is what's in the Nature Smart Fund, can disappear very quickly when cities across the country are already applying. It's my belief that Winnipeg must act quickly because we simply can't afford to leave this money on the table. Why? Well, we've already lost the Sumka property and the forest associated with that land, and likely will, and it looks like we may very likely lose the LeMay forest as well. The city has to make acquiring wild spaces like these a priority. And in my opinion, it's absolutely essential. Now, I suggested in that letter that there were a number of ways that the city could fund this. And I should mention also that according to the city's own park strategy, money was to be allocated to the park's capital budget for parkland acquisition. Specifically, item 5, appendix C suggested that 12 million over a 10 period be allocated. Unfortunately, that allocation hasn't happened. Parks has no cash on hand in its capital budget to lever the Nature Smart funds. And that, in my opinion, needs to change. If it doesn't happen, the city will fail in its commitment to ensure equitable access to green space, as promised in the Park Strategy and Center Plan 2050. It will also fail to take advantage of the critical role additional green space can play in mitigating extreme weather, such as heat waves, plus reducing emissions and strengthening the city's overall climate resiliency, not to mention attracting and retaining youth. So the two funds that I think might be most likely to access for matched funds for Nature Smart would be the percentage of the land dedication fund to be allocated to Parks capital budget, specifically for the purpose of land acquisition. Alternatively, council could also consider assigning a portion of the city's gas tax rebate towards Parks capital budget for land acquisition. It seems to us, all of us, more than appropriate to use a tax on fossil fuel to fund projects aimed at reducing emissions and increasing resiliency. So thanks very much. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. I know that Dave is up to speed, Dave Domke is up to speed on Nature Smart and can provide additional information. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Well, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think we do have some questions. Go ahead, Councillor Lord.
Yes, thank you for the delegation. I can share with the delegates the desire to acquire conservation lands. I am, however, not sure having more money solves the problem, given that once a landowner knows that there is interest from the public in purchasing land, conservation land, there's no guarantee that they won't ask, $1 billion for it, and it leaves us in a position where we can't. I guess we don't have the budgets, regardless of the size of the budgets, to purchase the land. To me, the answer would be an expropriation. We don't yet do that, in part because of the fear that
I'd be delighted.
Shocking.
I'd be delighted if the city was willing to expropriate land the way they for parks.
I guess my question is more, does it matter if we have a large fund for purchase? Because it seems that in the events where we do have large funds for purchase, we're not able to purchase because the landowner can set whatever price they want. We don't have the legal tool to go and compel them, like we do in the case of road widenings, for example. Is it perhaps it's a solution, but it doesn't solve the end problem. How do we get the land? Right?
Well, I think if you go into it assuming that a reasonable offer is not going to be accepted, I mean, if you don't have the money, you can't even try.
Well, from what I read,
That would be-
there's money.
I mean, as I said, I'd be delighted if the city would start to expropriate land for parks. I think that would be an excellent idea. But I mean, just to speak to the Sumka case, I mean, both offers were very similar. Unfortunately, the conditions were not as attractive. So we lost the Sumka that way.
Do you foresee a world where we would not lose lands where there is a politically charged environment? And I mean, the market value goes up as more and more people want it. This seems to be the problem I see happen over and over again. The public wants private land. We don't have the means to acquire it, even though we have lots of money to acquire it, because at the end of the day, it's the private owner who decides.
I think it would be very foolish not to access the money, and at least try to acquire lands that perhaps aren't even as contentious as a place like the LeMay, where you're also dealing with there. I mean, we all know there are a couple of developers who are, shall we say, more aggressive than others in terms of what they expect for land they own. And in many instances, the city won't always be buying from developers. They'll be buying from small landholders. So either way you cut it, I think it's worth applying for these funds. But I'll let Dave talk specifically about what his thoughts are on lands that could be acquired.
Because the answer I got through you.
As
Madam
to
Chair.
expropriation, as I said, I'm 100% in favor of expropriation.
Okay, well, then there's a follow-up question. Would you not be concerned, as I've heard concern from others, that if we do move to expropriate lands where there's conservation lands that are valuable to the city of Winnipeg, that the said landowners, those who own those lands will use their current rights and basically cut the trees before we can get into the legal expropriation?
Well, I mean, that's on the city. That's on the city.
How is it? Because
There's
we don't have the
no
right.
reason why, I'm sorry, there's no reason why the city agreed to allow developers to do whatever they want on their land prior to development approval. The city charter is very clear. Development is defined as the removal of vegetation. Until a project is approved, it's not a development. If the city simply enforced its own charter, this would not be happening. What's going on in the LeMay right now would not be happening, in my opinion.
So you're saying that this is contrary to my understanding. My understanding is that private landowners are allowed to remove trees on their properties. And if your understanding is different, then perhaps your statement, and I'm paraphrasing, that it's on the city may not be in line with our actual legal powers. Because how can we stop a landowner to chop the trees on their property if we don't have the legal power to do so?
Well, I mean, this isn't really speaking to whether or not the city should explore the possibility of accessing funds from Nature Smart like every other city in the country, but
That's true, but you did mention that the city is not doing their job in not having people cut.
no, I don't think they are. I'm sorry, I don't think they are.
Well, then,
I think they've
can
allowed,
you point to anything that says we have the right to stopping people cutting down the trees? Because,
well, I could, if I had the city charter in front of me, I'd read you the.
oh, I have it
definition.
in front of me, I can look it up.
Do, because essentially what it says is it defines development as including the removal of vegetation.
But what if there's no development, then we have no power, it's a moot point. If I
Well,
do lands,
from where I sit, developers are removing the trees to make a point to the city. They're basically holding the city hostage.
when there's no development, where's the power of the city to stop the removal of vegetation?
The interpretation of the charter.
Well, the
Yeah.
charter doesn't say anything about not cutting down the
Charter
trees.
and there would need to be a specific change to the zoning bylaw as well.
So the zoning bylaw would then not be in.
I mean, I want to stop, guys, like,
Okay,
yeah.
Well, it's,
we're
I-
getting
Madam
move on,
Chair,
because
the reason I'm drilling down,
into
I know.
legal territory,
Reason-
which we
Yeah.
don't have, and there've been some comments made on the record here where we're assuming people are doing certain things.
Mhm.
I want to remind decorum, and let's keep the temperature a little bit
My-
down.
my
I'll give you
point-
one last
Okay,
question, and then Councillor
Well, the
Gilroy has a
the
question.
reason I'm drilling down is because I've had multiple questions about what is happening on city land regarding trees.
Mhm.
And from my understanding, we do not have the legal tool to stop the removal of trees. And so I'm hoping to vet that so that people can have that understanding. And if I'm incorrect,
Okay,
then I would love to be
okay.
shown
Okay,
otherwise.
that's your interpretation, and I believe someone else has another interpretation, but we'll let Councillor Gilroy go ahead with her question. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make clear that, I mean, there's $1.4 billion that's sitting at the table that the city could be accessing. So I also do want to let councillors know that it's not necessarily even just about expropriation of land. It's about like our biodiversity. There's lots of things that we can actually be doing with that money. And some stuff might already be in the budget, but I don't know if we're actually accessing this fund. And so I want to make sure that we are accessing money that's sitting on the table to ensure that we're doing our biodiversity projects, to ensure that we are doing what we can to increase our urban forest. There's other ways that we can be using this fund. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are existing parks that could benefit from these funds in terms of development as well. So you're correct. I mean, the parameters are fairly broad, but again, I would let Dave speak to that because I think he's more informed and also has a clearer idea of how he'd like to use that money. Because you're correct, purchasing land is only part of it.
And then, did you know that it's a challenge, I think, for counselors because we have a climate change plan that's part of a total different department. And so it's hard for us to really understand if, you know, within our other strategies, if we're meeting these kind of targets and goals. So, you know, are our different departments connecting the dots between our climate action plan and what we need to do and kind of getting that money, what we need to bring that money down. And I think a lot of councillors don't even know what we're leaving on the table in terms of federal dollars. So are you aware that that's a complexity within our city system that we haven't?
Yeah, I am.
Having trouble navigating that.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why it's so essential that city departments start working together. I know that's certainly happening in the development of private tree bylaws in with urban forestry. There's a lot of cross fertilization going on, and I think also parks as a whole has a role to play in terms of helping or using natural infrastructure to offset not extreme weather, to offset things like flooding, to offset things like heat island effect. It's unfortunate that these things get siloed into separate pockets when it should be seen as holistic. Because I mean, more and more scientists are saying you can't disconnect the biodiversity crisis from climate. That if those natural areas are being degraded, it doesn't just affect the animals. It affects that area's ability to absorb carbon, to absorb floodwaters, to offset heat island effect. So there's huge crossovers between preserving urban biodiversity and urban wild spaces and should be part or seen as part of a climate action plan. You're quite right, Cindy. So the more those departments can collaborate, the better.
Thank you. Appreciated you coming online and enjoy the rest.
No,
Have a happy Friday.
I just want to say to Councillor Allard, I understand his frustration.
Okay.
And completely.
Looking to find solutions. I'm sure you are too. Thank you
Yes.
for the delegation.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your morning.
Thanks very much.
Okay,
That concludes
our
the
delegations. All right, we will move on to reports. Just let me pull my screen up here. All right, up first, we have fire protection service fee opt-in deadline extension. I believe we have Chief Schmidt and Ms. Gilmore. Thank you for coming in person. We always like that.
So do we.
Whenever you're ready, go right ahead into your presentation.
Good morning, thank you. So our first report of the day is a fire protection service fee opt-in deadline extension, and this is by way of a bylaw amendment. So back in October 24th, 2024, City Council passed amendments to the vacant building bylaw and fire prevention bylaw. These amendments were intended to, in part, to establish a new fee structure for vacant building fire protection fees. The new amendment also allowed owners who were charged under the previous bylaw to opt in to these new fee amounts under the revised bylaw, replacing the original invoice with a new invoice based on the updated fire protection service fee schedule. The deadline for the opt-in for this new fee schedule had been set for December 31st, 2024. The report before you is seeking an extension to this opt-in deadline to April 30th, 2025, to allow the department to provide updated invoices and properly communicate with property owners on their options under the new bylaw. The reason specifically for the extension, due to the excessive work required to assess and issue invoices and the desire to ensure impacted property owners have the ability to connect with the department on any questions they may have regarding the invoices, and also to make informed decisions on their ability to opt in. An extension of the December 31st, 24 deadline to April 30th, 2025 is being requested. Additionally, as you are all aware, we had the ongoing Canada Post labor action, and that had made it very challenging to issue invoices and communicate with citizens in a timely and cost-effective manner. Extending this deadline will ensure that these property owners have time to receive invoices and communications from the City of Winnipeg, and also communicate their questions and decisions to the city regarding opting in. This will ensure due diligence in our providing notice and answering questions from the property owners. And included in the report is the amendment on the last page, and we're available to take any questions you may have.
Yeah, I'm just looking here, the bylaw amendment just changes the date.
Correct.
Okay, not the whole bylaw itself that we had passed earlier last year.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I understand the reasoning for asking for an extension of time, which makes total sense. Could you go into a little more detail on the opt-in, what it means?
Sure, I'll ask Cicely Chief Gilmore to provide you with those details, Councillor.
So the bylaw amendments that were passed in October provided a new fee scheme based on the number of fires a property had as opposed to a cost recovery basis, which we were using before. But the way the bylaw passed was that anyone invoiced or having a fire prior to the date the new bylaw passed, October 24th, 2024, had to be charged under the old version first, and then they had the choice to opt into the new version. So this is the deadline to opt in, had been the end of the year, but that's what we're looking to extend. So there's a lot of communication back and forth with property owners when they receive one and they want to understand the implications of the new opt-in. And
I'll just add also, some of the property owners have retained legal counsel, and that counsel is communicating with the city on behalf of the property owner. And when that occurs, the public services then having to consult with city legal services in regards to those communications back. So that is also taking time.
Any other questions?
I'm
Go ahead,
not-
Councillor Giller.
I just wanted to really thank both of you, and I know we talk quite a bit in our office on encampments, and they're doing some really good work, and I just wanted to take the opportunity. Haven't sat on this committee before, so I wanted to thank you for your work, especially around encampments and helping to support our office. I'm sure many other councillors.
Okay, any other questions? No? All right, I don't have any other questions. This seems pretty good.
Motion to accept the Winnipeg Public Service recommendation.
Sounds good. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. Moving on to item number 2, I believe is under your guys' jurisdiction as
Yes,
well. Okay.
so the second
Hoarding.
report is the Winnipeg Hoarding and Collecting Behaviors Task Force update. So back on May 5th, 2023, the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services directed the public service to provide a written report on a semi-annual basis to the committee commencing in November of 2023 regarding the Hoarding and Collecting Behaviors Task Force. And this was to include the number of referrals that were made, and also the in-kind costs of this work incurred by the city. Hoarding and collecting behaviors are linked to complex mental health concerns that require intensive and sustained mental health supports. At this time, the city does not have the staffing or resources needed to fully and appropriately support the residents with hoarding behaviors, but we are undertaking this work with the resources that we have within community risk reduction. Be specifically to the requirements, in November of 2023, council sought, or the department sought council permission to enter into information sharing agreements with external partners to facilitate the sharing of referrals that involve hoarding within the community. This agreement has been shared with the service partners, which are listed in the report, and we are awaiting final signatures on that agreement from the service partners. On page 4 of the report, you'll see the number of cases that we're involved with in 2023, and those are 27. And moving forward into 2024, there was 9 referrals. You'll see that those are awaiting assignment. Again, in order to share specific details around cases, we need information sharing agreements in place. But I do want to assure the committee that in terms of the work that our emergency paramedics in the community are performing on a daily basis, they are able to share some information through existing agreements with Shared Health and Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. So I want to assure you that the most severe cases are getting some attention and addressed through the processes that we already have in place. And finally, in terms of in-kind costs, in 2023, each referral took an average of 4.5 hours of staff time to address, for approximately $480 of in-kind costs per case. In 2024, we further leveraged light duty staff to undertake some of this work. So when I refer to light duty staff, those are paramedics and firefighters that are currently on workers' compensation due to injury or long-term personal illness and are transitioning back to the workplace. So while they're not ready for full duty out in fire or paramedic operations, they have assisted in performing some of this community work. And these staff members are paid as part of their rehab process, and their involvement supports the program. In terms of next steps, we'll continue to secure these information sharing agreements with the service partners. And the final note is that in order to expand any of these services beyond basic referrals, we would need investments in additional trained staff and resources within the department. And we're available to take your questions.
Any other questions? No questions? No, this is just to receive it as information.
Correct.
It says semi-annual update. Is there gonna be another update? Like or is this like an update from a previous update? Like I never heard of semi-annual update.
Yeah, they come back to us here.
Oh, twice a year?
Yep.
On this issue? Okay.
Clerk's office will remind us.
So do you want me to put the motion in to receive it as information?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So
Sounds good. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you
Really
very
appreciate
much.
the data. Yeah, it's a difficult situation, but we always appreciate the time and the in-kind work that your service is doing. So thank you. Okay, all those in favor to receive it as information
Aye.
by Councillor Jobson? And that is. Excuse me, going on to item number 3, verbal report, East of the Red Recplex. Yeah, Mr. John. That one.
Good morning, councillors. Just a short update on the work that's going. It's the work is proceeding. A couple items to highlight for the committee on this verbal update is that site signage is proceeding and will be installed in early 2025. So in the next coming weeks, the site signage will be likely text only, and then a supplemental graphic will be installed later on the signage. So we're working to complete that as directed by the committee. Design is progressing, and just before Christmas, we completed a stage called schematical design that gets us to a class 4 estimate. Class 4 estimate was received just before Christmas and is under review by the project team. We're proceeding to preliminary design to get to the class 3 at this point. And we're on the original schedule that was provided to the committee about a year ago, with the schedule to try to bring a report to the committee for budget consideration in Q2 of 2025. And then we're launching into the second phase of public engagement that will launch February 4th with open houses on February 18th and 19th that are scheduled, and a survey that will be closing February 27th. So that's included in our project plan. And we're working with Councillor Wyatt's office to schedule a meeting to brief him on progress to date. So we're working on that right now. And that's my update for the committee.
And I believe Councillor Wyatt had brought up when he was on the committee about the signage. You had mentioned
Yep.
you guys are good to go.
Yeah, we're working on, we initiated some concerns about the size. The committee had indicated that there was some potential budget concerns. We don't want to build a highway sign there, but we're certainly proceeding with the direction that's been provided. And we found it a bit of a lower cost method to complete the site signage. So
Thank you. Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
Well, I certainly can't wait to see the 12 by 16 foot sign. You had mentioned that we had just completed a class 4.
that's correct.
Okay, any concerns with the costing for the class 4?
I haven't seen
Because it's
the
not-
class 4, it's
okay.
under review at this point. Like the original class 5 was presented at 89.1 or 89.2
I remember
million.
we had to increase it, so I was just wondering if the class 4 was
I don't have any
better
information.
or worse. That's
Yeah,
all.
on this time, in terms of the estimate, there has been extreme volatility in the marketplace, but it has muted in out a little bit. So we'll have to continue to see. But the project team is just reviewing it right now, so it's only a few days old. So we'll come back with the next update to confirm more on the schedule in the class 3. We're coming back in April of this year. So
Okay, April, we'll find out.
yeah, we'll give you more detail and make sure that we're on track to bring you a detailed admin report with the class 3 estimate. And then as per the schedule,
So it'd be
Other
premature for
funding
me to
levels
ask for numbers that aren't there yet.
Pardon
Okay,
me?
it's premature for me to ask for numbers that aren't there yet.
yeah, we just received this just before Christmas, so I think it was just a day
We'll
or
wait
two.
until April and find out then.
Yes, we're proceeding. So
Right. Any other questions? No? Okay. Can I get a mover to receive this
That's a-
verbal report?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. Moving on to item number 4, user agreement between Sim Nation Manitoba and the City of Winnipeg. Who do we have to speak? Come on up. Thank you, Director. Sorry, your name escapes me again.
Charlene Puglia.
Thank you.
Yeah, Charlene is here in support of the report as acting recreation services
Oh,
manager.
okay.
Thank
you. Good.
All right.
Charlene? I know Charlene for some time.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know when we were first met.
All right, so and I just want to thank, is Bruce still here?
Yes, he is, yeah.
I want to just thank Bruce Rose for appearing in delegation. We had some very good collaborative negotiations during this contract, so I appreciate him being here, and I think you heard that he's supportive of the terms and conditions so far, so. So the report before you essentially is the new negotiated terms and conditions with Manitoba for the use of the Pan Am Pool training tank. The agreement is a 20-year agreement, retro from September of 2024 through August 31st, 2044. So a 20-year agreement. Certainly we, through our conversations, and the last agreement was signed in 1993. So a lot of things have transpired since that time. So we certainly looked and discussed the historic capital and operating contributions to the agreement over that time. The first 10 years of the agreement provides an annual base cost or rent rate from Swim Manitoba to community services for the Pan Am Pool training tank of $200,000 a year and annually increasing by CPI. After the first 10 years, that will increase to $275 plus CPI. The agreement includes the training tank with specific dates and times, And those conversations will occur before August of every year with the community services and for people to just confirm how that usage will move forward each year. So Manitoba will have the right to allocate the training tank to provincial sport organizations during the scheduled hours that we've agreed on for the purpose of amateur sport development in competitive swimming, diving, water polo, artistic swimming, and triathlon. There is shared access, as we know, Councillor Dobson, to other facilities such as the timing booth, the office space, canteen, and video board. And what we think, and I think Bruce Rose also mentioned it, and I think it's a really great addition to this contract or this agreement, is section 75 of the terms and conditions, where it talks about any operating surplus that may be generated by Swim Manitoba for the use of a training tank will be placed in a reserve to be utilized for the purpose of amateur aquatic sport development and facility improvement at Pan Am Pool. And use of those funds would be discussed with the city and then in agreement how those funds would be used. So I think that's a huge benefit to both the organization and to the Pan Am Pool moving forward. And then lastly, the city already has, I think, Swim Manitoba has already updated their website, and they have and will be providing branding opportunities to the city, recognizing the city at all swim meets and acknowledging in all media, public activities and promotions connected with athletes' participation at international swimming competitions. One final thing, if the committee approves and we move on, this report will move on to council, and then legal services then would proceed with creating the actual legal agreement for signature.
Okay, any questions? I think we have a few. I know Councillor Lord was looking for some clarification, but I think I saw Gilroy first, then Dobson, and then Allard.
So I have a couple of questions. Why such a long agreement would be one of my questions. And then the next question, well, maybe I'll let you answer that one first.
Well, I think we looked at and talked about what the term of the last agreement was a 20-year term. We did discuss back and forth whether we want 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And I think just through negotiation, this is what we agreed to. We thought like there isn't another facility for that can be used. So this is a long-term agreement. This is a long-term usage of the space. So a long-term agreement. There are clauses certainly within here if there is some kind of termination clauses to reflect the city. What happens if the Pan Am Pool burns down, or it's not usable? Of course, we would have to consider that, or if they want to move to another facility. But right now, no, there is.
And just in terms of, just because I do want to protect like swimming space so that we have like adequate aquatic classes and stuff, because I know that we're still needing more space. So I guess my concern is around a little bit of that, like the ability for us to, I mean, Pan Am Pool isn't one of my pools, so I'm not sure. So maybe, I know it's a bigger pool with lots more spaces, but making sure that we have adequate space for our classes, city run classes, I think would be like, is a high priority for me. So just in terms of this agreement, like, should we be concerned of that? Like, because you also have such a long agreement. These times are kind of peak times when you would be teaching swim classes or training, or maybe elaborate maybe on that, if that should be a concern for us counselors.
I don't believe it is. I think I would say, just building on what Cindy talked about in terms of the longevity with the capital investment piece, that's when Manitoba part of the negotiations. I think that becomes a factor with the longer duration as well. And the hours, we have reviewed that as part of the negotiations. We are able to still maintain our services and support the needs that are required. And part of the terms, allows Swim Manitoba to continue to, there's space beyond that they can go through a process and request as well. So it's not all usage of Swim Manitoba. This is very specific to the training tank. So it's not the whole pool, Pan Am pool all the pools that are being utilized at the same time.
And so if there was something that the city was doing, I mean, I know Swim Manitoba would be probably part of it anyways, but say there was something that was that the city needed the tank for, would we be able to access that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's been major events where Swim Manitoba hasn't been as directly involved, and absolutely, that's part of the standard terms that we would be able to have access.
Okay.
Right.
I'll let Councillor Lloyd go next.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Councillor Lord.
well, just, I've been here for a while now, so we're signing an agreement with a third party. There's some language there about certain levels of service. What is the potential liability there? Is there potential liability? It was about, keeping the pools in a state where they can be used for competition training. Do we know how much that may or may not cost? I think you mentioned specific timelines. Is it already in the budget?
Yeah, I think that's just part of the regular, maintenance of the Pan Am pool.
Okay, like I heard
It's
earlier,
nothing
the bulkhead is falling apart, end of life, something like that. So is that like the type of thing that is required?
There's a capital project that's gonna be coming, and it's like Bruce referenced during his delegation too, feasibility study. There's some work scheduled for Pan Am pool in the near future, and there's some longer term feasibility studies that are being done. So yes.
And is that budget currently in the 6-year forecast or
There is a
not?
feasibility study, I have to check, I think it's around like
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's 28 or so.
28 for, just to look at the state of the Pan Am pool in general.
Okay,
But for the replacement of the bulkhead, I'll be honest, I don't know if we have that currently budgeted, but this would be a conversation, again, as Bruce mentioned, that they would be hopefully funding.
so I don't like being a stick in the mud, having been, I guess, having a front seat to the budget process. So if we sign this agreement, there's an expectation of a certain level of service, and if the budgets are currently not available, does that mean we're gonna need to find more money going forward in the event where the third party is not in a position to fundraise the necessary funds?
We will keep Pan Am pool at the level that we can, based on the budget that's available.
Based on approved budgets? Okay, and there's the possibility of the third party coming in and supporting that work?
Okay.
Is that
That's
clear?
the added bonus to this particular agreement now, right?
Okay, and then Madam Chair, through you to Cindy, so I heard specific timelines. Is there more information on that?
Timelines for the agreement being signed.
I recall the word specific timelines. Was that related to a capital project or was that related to the agreement being signed? Or perhaps,
I think it was tied to about the agreement, just in terms of the next steps of once it's approved by council, then we're continuing our work with legal now that we've completed negotiations with Swim Manitoba. So if you're looking for a specific timeline, it will just follow the process of going through council and we go from there.
yeah, I wasn't.
That's not what you're thinking?
No, I wasn't necessarily thinking of a specific timeline until I heard the word specific timeline, which then, starts getting into budgets and timings.
Everything has already been incorporated
Yeah.
within the budget, if
Yeah.
that's what you're
Yeah.
asking.
Okay,
That's,
I mean, ultimately, that's my concern, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Dobson?
Yeah, first thing I'd like to point out, thank you very much for pointing out item number 75. The operating surplus is gonna stay within the system, so the city won't be able to absorb any surpluses, and it'll stay within the facility. I think that's awesome to have that language in there. Promoting swimming in the city of Winnipeg, albeit at a higher level, is extremely important. We're surrounded by rivers, lakes, swimming pools in the backyards. Anything swimming is good. This is a very positive thing. And putting a 20-year lease on it tells everyone the importance. So I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you.
And one more just pressing question.
Sure.
In the past, how long was the agreement with Swim Manitoba?
It was 20 years as well, I believe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there now corporate policy in terms of length of times of leases, and is it within that corporate policy?
Just to clarify, this is not a user agreement. It just to clarify about in terms of a
Oh,
lease.
it's not an actual lease
It's
to use.
not a lease, this is a user agreement, so specific to the training tank at Pan Am Pool.
Mhm.
So, but we absolutely, we work with legal in terms of the duration and the options and we built that into our negotiations with Swim Manitoba, and this is what we did.
And then procedurally, if any changes are required over time, is that something that comes back to this committee and then council? Like were there to be, I don't know, like I see information here, exclusive storage and club offices, shared access. Any of these things need changing over time?
Say we would probably deal with it as.
Within the
public
existing agreement?
service
Yeah.
And
We would work.
organization.
Yeah, we'd work with legal on where we needed to come back, obviously, if there was a significant change, we would certainly work with legal and come back through the proper process, bidding it back through committee accordingly.
Okay, so. Well, I think the work that is being done here is commendable. I think it's excellent. I do recall a time where a private group wanted to lease public facilities, specifically the Provoshic Pool. At that time, I think the person who wanted to lease during hours outside of the lease time, or I should say it's shared use agreement time, we're going to use the same types of terms. There was the deferred maintenance piece that was built into that contract, which in that case made it not viable for that particular organization to use the facility. So there's no deferred liability cost built into the contract. That's a subsidy, presumably.
Well, generally, all pools are subsidized, they're a public good.
Yes.
We don't make money on them. And everybody's gets a subsidized rate, essentially.
I'm thinking of a case where it wasn't, where the deferred maintenance was built into the proposed.
Sure about that
Okay.
particular incident.
For you. I recall it happening. I don't know the specifics of it, but I do recall there was a proposal a number of
Yeah,
years ago.
I recall,
for
like, yeah, over hundreds, it was hundreds of dollars an hour because we were building in the deferred maintenance.
Yeah, part of the uniqueness was when, outside of regular operating hours, then we charge incremental staffing costs, which we do that. That would be sort of Manitoba or
It was-
the other user group, right? So an outdoor pool is a little different in terms of the asset, right? And the hours of operation versus a site like Pan Am that's open 7 days a
Understood.
week.
Yeah, but it was specifically on the building. So, okay, so perhaps this is,
Yeah,
Not being dealt.
keep in mind, this is an agreement about the training tank in Pan Am, right? It's quite specific to that portion.
and then on a related but not the same note, I heard from the delegation that they do recognize there's a subsidy in terms of their being there. Do we quantify that? Because when I communicate to the public about the value of aquatic services and the investment in aquatic services, people still think their fare pays their way. And there's recognition around this table that it doesn't, but do we have any number that we can use in communications with the public on how much it actually costs?
Well, each pool is different. And I.
So
believe that-
a prorated across the portfolio rate, like the public doesn't know how expensive aquatic services are.
Right.
And it's frustrating when you're communicating that in the context of facility closures, how much of an investment it is. And because it's still out there, like, why don't you just charge a bit more? Well, a bit more would be like $50 a person if you're talking about
In some
indoor
places, yeah, you're right. At some pools, depending on the number of people that are attending and the the cost to operate the pool and to staff the pool and to run lessons and yeah, it would be, their admission would be minimum, probably $25, if not more,
The state
per
of their
person.
infrastructure at that pool too, right? To-
Yeah, but how much work would it be to have a prorated portfolio estimate at the cost? And to the subsidy, because today we're not running a grant to this organization.
No.
But we're providing an in-kind contribution that's worth a lot of money. And I don't think people see it that way. Maybe they would if we had a number that built all the deferred maintenance and the actual costs of investing in these aquatic facilities, which I believe to be a public good, which I believe we should do more of.
I mean, I don't know if part of it becomes the outside of the specific hours that are identified as part of this agreement.
Well, I think
It's
I
fees and
would,
charges
I would
that
prorate.
everybody pays, right?
I would prorate I would prorate the hours based on the entire portfolio, come up with some big major number. But when the time comes where we need to renovate Bonnetel Pool, which is gonna come at some time in the next few years, and it's gonna be a big price tag, these would be the type of numbers that would be, well, for me, more than nice to have, like people are gonna ask these types of questions. We're signing an agreement today, yes, I know that's what's on the table today, but I've been around long enough to think a few years ahead, and there's value here. We're signing a big grant. Think. An in-kind grant. Am I wrong?
Well,
There's a market value to this agreement being signed.
we don't know the dollar value. I don't think the administration knows
But I'm-
the subsidy.
But I'm like making up all sorts of fiscal tools we could use in order to quantify that agreement. Whenever we're talking about public facilities like the 219 Provencher,
Mm.
we didn't have, well, we had eventually what the market costs would have been relative to, but it was already way down the process and many people were convinced there wasn't a
I
subsidy
think,
there.
Charlene, do you have a bit of a ballpark on just Pan Am Pool itself? Maybe not so much the training tank, but a ballpark number of how much it costs to actually operate and maintain the Pan Am Pool. I think the numbers are in the 2025 budget, but there is like a number.
Yeah, it's over $5 million.
Okay.
Including
you go.
deferred maintenance.
No,
Yeah.
that is
See, that's
salaries and
that's
benefits.
the
and-
elephant in the room is
and-
deferred maintenance.
Well, the deferred maintenance is the unfunded liability that exists on every single recreation facility, which is almost $1 billion, so.
This one's a big one.
But annually, for the 2025 proposed or preliminary
not
budget
closing
for
this
Pan Am, salaries, 2.3 million, facility maintenance, 3 million. And that includes utilities.
That's just
So
to
it's five-
operate Pan Am.
That's
Pool.
to operate the pool, 5.4 million almost.
And we, as a city, subsidize that, right?
Well, we
This
don't
is-
collect 5.4 million in revenue.
Yeah, there you go.
So one
For
point,
Pan Am Pool.
it's 1.7.
Nor do we from any facility.
No,
But-
this is, and that becomes part of, no disrespect to about the dollars and cents, but back to the point of, is it just about the dollars and cents versus the value of the comment of the good of swimming and that access to the
I'm on
tourists?
that
No,
team.
no, I understand
I'm on
that,
that
I
team.
understand, and it isn't, so I'm just saying if, I think it's the quantitative and the quality, right? That type of it's that both pieces that are important.
So one of the questions that's gonna arise is why don't you charge more to the user groups and specifically the user groups that are currently occupying and those people who benefit from the services of the pool? And I don't think we have that information. I mean, it's not enough for me not to want to approve this agreement today. But I know that the day will come where some big dollar amount is required. And people will be like, why don't people pay more? Why don't we charge the private groups more that are using the pool? Like all of these questions will be on the table and I don't know.
We have rental costs, we have council approved fees and charges. Those are the rates that we use to charge.
Why don't we,
With this is, a bit of an exception.
Yeah.
We started at that point last year.
Yeah.
Was, are we gonna charge them council appropriates? And the answer from the committee was no. So we negotiated with Pan Am,
Got it.
with the Swim Manitoba
Mhm.
to come up with these terms and conditions and rates.
If it helps,
I'm thinking about the deferred maintenance and how that's not part of the conversation, that being problematic.
from a service-based budget, just got a little bit of data, if this helps, from a service-based
Perhaps,
budgeting.
yeah.
$27.68 for 2025 preliminary budget. So from our service-based documents, that's where we're,
That's the price.
that's where we're getting.
So, okay, let me, perhaps reframe the question. Today, are we to support this proposal, which I think we probably will, reading the room? What is the in-kind value of the thing that we're providing today that we should be celebrating, were it a cash contribution instead of in-kind?
I think what the question, in order to answer that, is the difference between what they're paying at 200,000 and what would it be at council approved fees and charges rates?
Which is still a subsidy. I'm looking for a
Everybody
bigger
gets a
number than
subsidy,
that.
right?
No, I understand that, but this is a 20-year agreement. So I'm looking to find a way to celebrate this in terms of dollars and cents, in terms of what the in-kind contribution is. Perhaps
From the
over
city
and
of Winnipeg
above,
side?
yeah, like
Okay.
we're not writing a check,
Right.
but we're giving a thing, and the thing's worth a lot.
Yeah, it could be
But we don't-
considered an in-kind grant, but we don't recognize in-kind grants generally within our budget.
Well, I'd love
But-
to communicate to the public, look at this amazing investment we made in this organization over 20 years. We're investing in aquatics. But I'd like to include deferred maintenance. I'd like to include that all in number. When the
Okay, so-
Provencher case was there was deferred maintenance built into this person using the site of the facilities and an outdoor unheated pool. And I don't see that being discussed right now.
I think the portion where, maybe it's not so much deferred maintenance, but
It wasn't this big.
the revenue, extra revenue generated could help with some of the capital costs to the tank.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that was more of a PSP type of a situation.
What's that mean?
Private service provider, sorry.
Yes, yeah. it
I
was a
think that
private
was
provider.
private service, so, sorry, what you said prompted me to think of,
Why the different
a
treatment?
for-profit type situation versus what's in Manitoba. So, you
So
know,
if you're asking, what I guess there's a
Can I
difference.
backtrack a bit again? Not-for-profit groups will occupy city facilities. And when comes the time for rate increases, which happens sometimes, like we heard about inflationary. And present company excluded, 10 years from now, there might be a conversation about why do we need to pay the inflationary increase? We can't afford it. We want to continue our programming. And then you hear, we're already paying our way. We're already paying everything that is required in terms of the operations, and it doesn't include deferred maintenance. I would like to be able to show the value that we are providing to the group and to the community in terms of the investment in aquatics, because I know it's a big number, and I don't want to hide behind the big number. I don't want to hide the big number. I want to celebrate the big number.
Well, I don't think we can answer that question right now, but yeah, we won't be able to quantify the dollar value because it's just the tank. The $5 million was like the entire facility. So
Well-
they would have to kind of block off the tank.
Tanks, shared access areas like timing booth, office space, canteen, associated amenities, exclusive storage and club offices. There's money there. It's not money cash,
No.
but it's like in lieu money.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it's not that simple to quantify
Yeah.
either. I mean, it's a huge space with a huge number of square feet.
It would be
We can come up
It would
with
be nice to
something.
have this type of information to promote investment in aquatic facilities,
Okay, noted,
which all we see is
noted.
things that are piecemeal. Okay. I've had my time. I've had my time in the sun just now.
All good,
Thank you.
noted. All right, any other questions, comments? If not, then I will entertain a motion.
I'll move the motion,
Okay.
public service recommendation.
Sounds good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that's carried. Moving on to item number 5. Video camera enforcement program for illegal garbage dumping. I believe we have manager, I don't even know what your department's called now.
Licensing bylaw
Thank you.
enforcement.
Winston Yee, thank you. Good to see you. Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year, 15 years.
Okay, so we have a motion that came from council. I believe Councillor Edie. I have not reached out to Councillor Edie, but I am quite familiar with the program. And I think they referred in the first term. We did a pilot project. Yes. There is I believe, a couple of reports that came out of it. And I'm assuming, and since Councillor Gilroy's here, you second it, I'm assuming from Councillor Edie, he's looking to reinstate that video camera enforcement program that we did in the pilot project in the first term. Is that correct, Councillor Gilroy?
Yes,
Okay.
or the committee is amenable to at least have a report, because there's no report on here, to maybe come back on with
Costs?
Yeah, with the costs and a little bit of report, so we know what we're kind of looking at.
But I think we do have costs already from the first report that came out. What was the
It was a 2019. It was
2019?
March 8th, 2019 was a report on what it would cost to continue with the program.
So that's a little bit outdated.
The only difference would be, cost increases for, CPI and salaries. So I don't think there would be a huge change to what you've already seen, but unless you think otherwise.
No, at the time, we calculated based on the bylaw enforcement investigator, looking at operating costs, so that would just be CPI related increases as well as equipment costs to increase more generally flexible and changing our approach and take lessons from the initial pilot that was given to council between it was 2016 to 2018, and we reported back to 2018.
Okay, and how much was it?
Well,
To continue the program?
To continue, at the time in 2018, it was 150, so we're projecting about 175,000.
No, sorry, I got questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, I remember what, because I know this started with the alternative committee, kind of looking at way, and from my recollection of what went on is that it was almost a cost recovery, because we were able to, and now we even have stronger bylaws in terms of enforcement and collecting that money than I think we ever have. So have you looked at the ability for this to be cost, like that we recuperate?
Cost neutrality?
Yeah.
Well, okay, the initial pilot, we only calculated the capital costs of the cameras. So the capital cost was around 54,000. And candidly, staff were working off the side of their desk to get some of this stuff done and certainly their regular duties and such. And so when we issued, what we found was we had successes on multiple levels. Number one was hotspots. So we went to a number of different hotspots, and the cameras, I would say the technology's advanced quite a bit more now, that we want to increase our agility and flexibility. And it created some displacement, but we also had good results. We also then looked at awareness of the program that created inherent deterrents to people illegally dumping. So we found people who were contractors, I'll say, where we had kitchen products like old cabinets and that stuff being dumped. So we created deterrents from the awareness, the media attention, the councillors who speak about it. And the third was our enforcement approach. So we found distinctly that you need video evidence, quality video evidence to secure a conviction. And so the majority of our convictions went through. I think the final total was around 28,000 in fines that were issued and paid through the courts. It's a far cry from the other component. Where the majority of our costs come in, candidly, is staffing. What we looked at was we primarily assigned our supervisors to help run the program. And we were looking at an investigator to be more proactive. Some of the feedback that Councilor you gave me at the time, Councilor Edie and others, was more than just a static program. At the time, it was, we're gonna put a camera up, you know, capture some people who are regular illegal dumpers will notice that those cameras are there and will dump the garbage somewhere else. What you wanted was a much more agile and proactive program. In terms of that, we needed a dedicated investigator. So that's where the bulk of the cost would come in. Would we see more fines? Probably. I'm hesitating to suggest there will be cost neutrality, but it would create a qualitative, I guess, impact to some of the communities that are out there. And it's it's a new service that we would be providing, and that's why we would be the ask for in terms of operating.
Go ahead, Shazia.
Like, I think this is just a conversation for all of us, because Councillor Santos and Councillor Dobson, you both know that we do provide extra funding for illegal dumping. Like, we do pickups through garbage and stuff like that. So in other areas, we are paying for this anyways, where the proactive kind of measures to help stop this is kind of what I think. And Councillor Edie and I would be hoping, Councillor Santos probably, for your neighborhoods, what we want to kind of alleviate, because we're seeing a lot more of it. So just in terms like moving forward today, I'm wondering if the committee would be willing to look at like maybe, and this is the challenge that I have with all my kind of motions, is aligning like the work from like what is the cost that we're providing at through water and waste, right? What does that cost? Like maybe if we do this program in the next budget, like this budget, we do have in there like dumping, but maybe next budget we align it to this. We try to hope that we prevent it, but we need a little bit more like a report back on how, like mixing the departments together and like, you know, do you guys see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying is because we are doing extra pickups.
Right.
I believe through water waste to kind of be a little bit more proactive on. Maybe the question is like, what's the service request for the illegal dumping, the 311 service requests? Like how many calls of services are we getting? Do you happen to know what the
It's cost departments because in the 2024 report from the water was to have more consolidation of triaging.
Yeah.
That will be my colleagues at Water and Waste who could probably better answer some of that because they will refer now, the quarterback refers some of those things to us if it is on private property. And again, private property, whether illegally dumped or not, we're dealing with conditions found, right? And just the negative impact of garbage continuing to leave it. So it does involve another department if we're looking. Go ahead, Cindy.
I wonder if one of the things that could be considered is asking, I think what you're asking for is what is currently being spent on illegal dumping.
Right.
For
Yes,
pickups,
yes.
which is by water and waste.
Yeah.
So maybe through that, you can confirm or ask that question.
Yeah, because
Like, I don't know if it's 10,000 or if it's 100,000.
right now, as it stands, it just looks at like implementing, and I'm pretty sure my council colleagues wouldn't go for just implementing it. So there might be some more facts that are needed in order for us to say, hey, do we need a more wider program? And so there are these other programs going on in these different departments. And I know even for community centers, like it is a huge challenge and they're paying the costs of like, they're just paying it out of pocket at community centers, picking up people's illegal dumping, right? So it's a huge kind of cost. So I don't know if we can maybe even find that data out. I know the community centers in my ward, maybe not all community centers, are very having a major issue, and they already don't have a lot of money to begin with. So so that could be part of that too, if we can maybe ask, you know, our community centers on.
And if I may. Madam
Yes,
Chair,
go ahead.
I would just be cautious in terms of expectation, because when we did roll out the pilot, it was on public right of way. And so a lot of the private properties, we weren't able to do the privacy legislation to put the cameras there. With a more agile program, we'd have to look at that through legal services. And it's also a service to a specific property that we could provide now in a sense that they have video evidence on, and that was part of our outreach before in that pilot, is that if you have video evidence of a person in a vehicle with license number XYZ that's dumping onto your property, then we can take an affidavit, we can take that evidence, but it's incumbent upon that individual. And what we found is many of those people do not want to continue going forward through that court process. So for us to get a conviction, it's evidence received from Mr. or Ms. Smith, who have that evidence. You have to prove to the court that the chain of that evidence is exact. So we do provide some advice and liaising with property owners, and we would facilitate the issuance of a ticket, but it requires their involvement. And that would likely be the case if we're dealing with, and just to align expectation, if it's illegal dumping on public right of way, that's where we would focus the majority of our program and then partner with private property owners.
And so illegal dumping on public right of way, that's not water and waste, that's public works.
Right, but water and waste does
Do
order
the
back
Okay.
the triaging of,
The cleanup,
correct.
okay, go ahead, Councilor
Hey,
Thompson.
I'm having a little confusion there. So if someone dumps something on my yard, okay, a private residence, then I had video of it, I would have to go through the process and then take the time and go through the courts and all that to solve this.
Partly correct, sorry to interrupt. We would, if you contacted 311 and you say, I have video evidence of someone dumping garbage on my property, it would likely go to water and waste through the previous report and they would funnel to us. We would send an officer to your location. Two things would happen. Number one, the garbage on your property would have to be cleaned up, remediated. So our staff normally try to, in that path, just work with you to say, you still have to remove it. You have an obligation under neighborhood livability bylaw. On a secondary note, we would then say, if you're looking to charge this person, we would take the evidence, but the evidence is coming from you. So we would help facilitate the entire process, but because it's not evidence gathered by the city of Winnipeg, nor by our officer, but by yourself, we would help facilitate the charge in court. But you may have to attend court to say, this is my video camera. Yes, I took out the SD card. I witnessed this. And so.
Okay, so that was one. Now, there are certain areas where they do it continuously and different people are doing it, so that person would be in court all the time in order for this to work. At which point I would prefer we put one of our cameras there so that we wouldn't have to deal with the individual property owner because we collected the evidence and then we would represent. Am I understanding that correct? If we had our own
We would.
video there, we wouldn't involve?
Right, if it was your property, we would have to get a release from you.
Yes.
To put our camera there, work your cameras and so forth, then we would just facilitate charge.
If it was prevalent enough, then would it make sense for us to do it?
Correct.
Now, my other thing is it working? The video, is it stopping people from dumping? Are we doing enough?
We haven't done that candidly since, like, at a more aggressive rate since the pilot project. We did put in, after, just to be very transparent, we put in multiple requests for the budget on this. My director is quite aware of that as well. And so, it's a matter of priority. So I'll leave that and won't comment more on that side. But on the other side, we would respond, like the cameras that we have are dated, like the technology from 2015, right? And so, there was some pros and cons to it at the time that we reported back. I wouldn't say they're very effective cameras at this point in time because they're older technology. So it's not an aggressive approach that we would take because we don't have dedicated resources to it. Okay.
But I am curious, just to tag into your question, back then, I didn't get a chance to read the report, but how effective was the program? Did it actually deter illegal dumping, or did it just move the problem to another neighborhood once they found out they were being watched?
Yeah, very good question. It had positive results. We looked at it from hotspots in the report, and I welcome if you want to go back to, I think it's on Demas from February of 2018. we identified a number of different hotspots. Some of it was positive in that the cameras resulted in there's no more dumping in the area. There was some displacement, but not a significant amount of it. So we would move the cameras and they weren't easy to move, candidly. We need a bucket truck and otherwise.
Yeah.
But it was effective, reasonably effective in terms of addressing hotspots.
Hotspots in public right of ways.
Correct, back
Okay.
lanes, otherwise.
Mhm.
In terms of enforcement, undeniably it was successful because when we went for charges, we would get convictions because video evidence would be there. There were some instances where the judge may have upheld it or otherwise, but that was rare, and that would due to reasons that the justice would provide. But for the majority, we would get successful convictions. So from a success perspective, to get a conviction, you do need video evidence. And how we wrote the bylaw was that it was a vehicle, so it's registered owner of the vehicle with license plate number X would get charged because it was their vehicle used in the illegal dumping, right? And there are fines for people who are dumping otherwise, but again, in those circumstances, then it would be difficult for our members to find a person who looks like X, right?
Yeah, license plate works.
Correct.
Another question, are the fines adequate?
Well, we went through Provincial Offences Act, which are for an individual, 1,000 for early payment, 2,000 regular, and for corporations, companies, it was 2,000, 4,000. We do go through our MBEA as well. They're not as high. Under MBEA, it's for dumping an individual is 300 to 600 is the regular, 300 is early, and corporations 500 and 1,000. The reason for that is it moves to POA if it's over 1,000. So we've been charging under, at least under that program, under Provincial Offences Act.
Okay, my last question, if I could. Which area of the city is most prevalent for the illegal dumping?
You know what, I would be saying it.
Or we just have hotspots?
You know, it was probably mostly in the inner city, but we did see it throughout some of the suburbs and vacant broad land areas, right? We saw that as well. We saw some way in St. James.
I have some in St. James, I know.
Yeah, and we put a camera there at one point, that deterred.
It's still there.
Right, and so like those are what we would look at. There are some, rural roads that people are dumping as well, but I would say the problems that are in the inner city, though, what we saw, it could be a combination of illegal dumping, but it's also, could be bins, when the bins are out and people go through bins, right? Like transient people would go into some of the bins and they're looking for stuff, right? And so we've seen that. We've identified those issues. Are some of the bins adequate? So it's a multitude of issues. It's not as simple as illegal dumping when it comes to the inner city.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, like for me, it was a huge, that's why Councillor Edie and I did this motion, because we saw really good results. And I think another challenge is like with apartment buildings, like because people move out the 15th of the month and the month, and it costs money to go take your stuff to the dump. So they tend to just, put it in your neighbor's property, right? And so then the cost and the burden goes on to that property owner. So that's a big challenge. And then in terms where we're seeing lots like in the parks and stuff, I know in the inner city as well. And so that would be that public space. Is our community centers considered public space?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer on it.
I would say that it's a responsibility of the community center.
It would be,
They own it, but they manage it, right?
Okay.
So they pay for garbage.
Garbage removal. But we could, if this was implemented, they could, because I'm hoping it would be the cameras that could be moved around again, because I think that's you're gonna have illegal dumping here for a while, and then it's, hopefully you won't need it anymore. Could they request to have that service?
All that, we would try to be as agile and flexible and be responsive to the public. I mean, we walk a fine line without being private kind of security people for different property owners. So it'll be a combination, working with those individuals and, trying to resolve the problem.
And then the report comes to, and I'm sorry, I will go back and look at it. In that report, how many cameras was that? Did we have?
We had 6 cameras. I think there's 6 cameras in total.
6 cameras and 1 enforcement personnel.
No, it kind of, we had multiple people just doing it from the side of their desk,
Oh,
right? So we had
okay.
no dedicated resource to it. And that's why we're asking for an investigator, because we wanted to be proactive, someone to, you know, address council concerns and hotspots, be able to go and do surveillance, use different types of technology like GoPros and trail cameras and other stuff that can be low.
Yeah, that's what I initially thought. It was more of a mobile one, not necessarily stationary.
No, these
not
were
like
flash
mobile.
cams. They were used in the United States and it kind of predates when I got here, how they determined to use that camera. But I understand it was a company out of the States. It was used where it was a flash cam where it was encased within a box. It would flash so that the people knew that there was cameras in the area. Some of them you could put, you know, fluctuations. Let's use it. But there were 6 specific cameras that they tried to use, and at the time, that was the technology. Now there's much greater, I guess, flexibility in the technology, and we did list the pros and cons of using that tech back in the
So with that, I'm wondering if the committee is amenable, is if we do a motion that looks at coming back with a report that looks at the cost that, I think you said it, Cindy, the cost that we are spending right now on illegal dumping. And then revisit that report and maybe amend some of the numbers if it's needed, so we kind of can look at, like, you know, the full cost of what we're spending now already and what more of a preventative cost would be.
Could we do that? Because I'm looking to Peter, because it looks like it's under a different
This is the challenge.
jurisdiction, yeah.
Sorry, what's the question?
The question is, so she's looking to amend the motion to actually ask for the cost of spending what the city spends now on illegal dumping. In the city or just the inner city?
I think in the city,
In the
because I
city.
think it was beneficial, like I know Councillor Luke's had some areas that they were getting a lot of legal dumping, and I think it
So
helps.
because that's under water and waste, that does the collection.
Well, what we can do is we can ask for a report back to the appropriate committee of council.
There you go.
But yeah, depending on what we ask for, we can refine the motion to be more specific to what committee it is.
Okay.
But until we get to that point, it's a little bit difficult to say.
Yeah.
But that portion certainly would be water and waste.
Because there's a cost to bylaw enforcement to go out every day. There's costs that, and I know that they're, not only are they doing legal dumping pickups, they are doing extra pickups in these areas. So there is like through water and waste. I think it's just a call to water and waste, basically.
Yeah.
What are you spending on this, right? In the inner city in particular, so.
So are you looking for costs as well from his department on illegal dumping? Like what his
Yeah,
office
like-
has spent
Yeah,
to date? Do you want to
Yeah.
say in the last year, like
Okay, go
2024?
sure.
Are you looking for costs or budget?
Costs, how much it costed in 2024?
Well, but budget too, because
Because if you're talking about a future program that might realign budgets across departments,
Correct.
this is kind of what I
correct,
think
yes,
you're going for.
yeah,
It's not what it costs, it's what the budget is.
right. Yeah. Right? Looking, it's a
Well,
budget
that's the
and
thing, you're
cost. It's
looking
both,
for,
right?
it's
Because-
kind of both, but are you, that's the thing, what data set are you looking for?
Well, we need to know how much it costs to for us to even have, like, so by law, whether we have the cameras or not, they're still going out and doing work in terms of illegal dumping, right? How many calls for services that is. There's a cost to that, right? Whether there's-
Sorry, to interrupt. I have to qualify them, because when we get a call, let's say it's on private property, that there's a garbage issue, our staff deal with it as conditions found. right? So even if the garbage got there through an illegal dumping or not, right, our staff work with it as there's a garbage complaint from this neighbor to that neighbor, and this neighbor says, I never dumped that, someone else did. We're still dealing with that property owner as conditions found, not illegal dumping.
It's a different scenario.
Yes.
So now, okay, so good,
But-
you're,
But still, they can kind of tell, like, your officers can kind of tell that it's illegal dumping versus not. I mean, it's hard to, I mean, at the end of the day, that's hard to say who, right? But I think generally, like, I go down the back lane and I can even tell that that's been illegally dumped and not like. Okay,
May I ask a question?
sure, yeah.
So, just the end result, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of jumping to what
where you
The
going, where I was
purpose-
going,
the purpose of all of this is to hopefully reestablish an illegal dumping program that could be somehow funded from existing budgets
Yeah,
within the city of Winnipeg.
yeah.
That's kind of what I think where you wanna go
Well,
with this. So
not,
then,
not necessarily, if there's like, I'd like to offset costs, there might be
Offset.
an extra cost, but
Okay.
maybe it won't be
right,
175,000, it might be really,
Right.
the difference could be very small.
so again, I think it go back to what's the current budget the city currently has with the various departments relative to illegal dumping.
Okay, what she said.
what she said. No, Peter was on his phone, we caught you.
Well,
Which then could be a report or referral to EPC.
Well, this
I
one
think
has to go
that's
back
up
to
you.
council anyways,
yeah.
Okay.
so then we'll figure it out.
all right, so report back in 180 days.
Yeah.
And on what exactly?
On the city of Winnipeg's
Video camera enforcement
budget
program.
relative to illegal dumping, existing budgets relative to illegal dumping that exist in all various departments.
180 days, how many months is that?
Yeah, I think like you make a very good point, because for clarity, we don't have a budget for
Right.
illegal dumping, because our budget for our staffing is for the enforcement, the NLB, the big bill, and so forth. So there might be elements of illegal dumping, but we wouldn't be nuanced into that minutia of detail, right? Whereas water and waste, and I don't want to speak for my
Yeah.
colleagues here, but if there is a budget related to, property owners call and say this was illegally dumped on my property or it's on public right of way, then there is likely some type of monies that help to support the staff, whether it's through public works or otherwise, to go and pick it up.
All right, so we'll ask for a report back in 180 days to the appropriate committee of council on the city of Winnipeg's total existing budget relative to illegal dumping.
Illegal dumping enforcement, illegal dumping
Enforcement and remediation.
remediation.
Enforcement and remediation.
Including, you probably want some information on the number of calls, right?
Yeah. Maybe our calls have gone down. You know, like, who knows, right?
All right,
Do you want it just for the year of 2024? How far back are we going?
Well, you know what, it'd be nice to, and I don't know when they kind of started that extra garbage service that the province, that the city is doing.
I think we did that in the multi-year budget.
Yeah, so it might be nice to kind of go back to see the difference, because I think it's making a difference, that extra garbage pickup, so. You know,
so should we just say the past 5 years?
Okay,
And that's moved by Councilor Kilroy.
okay,
yeah.
that's good. All right, all those in favor of the amending motion,
Yes.
that's gonna go back to council.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, perfect.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. Oh,
Madam Chairperson, should
Yes.
we perhaps talk quickly about number 7 before we go on to
Oh.
number 6 for the
that'd be great. Yeah, but I was gonna ask for a quick break. I just need a quick
5 minutes?
5-minute break, sorry.
Okay, 5 minute break.
That's community connection.
All right, we're back from our quick little 5-minute break. I just saying, yeah, we don't need a motion to work through the lunch hour. Okay.
That's all right.
If it's the will of the committee, since we still are working, we're still doing community services. There's a request to maybe move 7 up first and then deal with 6 later.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, Dave. Yeah. Save the best for last. Okay? Okay, so we'll move on to Millennium Library Community Connection Space. Obviously, there's a lot of questions and clarification because we do have new committee members on. So thank you for coming and clarifying some of the differences on what had occurred with community safety host, community crisis workers, and librarians, because I believe there's I'm calling a 3-person approach is how I'm gonna ask. So let's first talk about community connection space and then the differences between what's in the community connection space, which is in the lobby, and then what is also inside the Millennium Library that's being offered inside the Millennium Library once you get past security. Okay, let's try that. Does that make sense? I think that's because I'm seeing it as 2-part. Right? And one's not being funded and one is being funded. So that's kind of okay. Let's do that first.
Sure. So, and I appreciate the couple of delegations that we did have and thank them for attending. Some of the information I think was good, some requires some clarification. And so further to some of the questions that you had, and you had a number of them, I think we can correct some of those inaccuracies. So I'll start and then essentially, Karen Borland, our manager of library services, works and lives essentially day to day, Monday to Friday, and sometimes evening and the weekends, whenever is required, at Millennium Library. So she is fully aware of how the community connection space was created, which was by a federal grant money. So it wasn't city money that created the community connection space. The initial funding was very temporary in nature. And then council did provide operating funding for 1 year only, which was 2024. So the community connection space is not a safety measure. So contrary to, I think, Dr. Kurnow, where she was talking about, that it was created as a safety measure. No, that was not the case. It is an extension of library. It is a library service. It's a referral service. And it's staffed by librarians with the assistance of the community safety hosts. So the 614,000 that was identified is what is required incremental funding if we were to reopen the community space. So their redeployments, no, there might have been a couple of staff that assumed a vacant position within the libraries, but those staff that were in community connections are not now in the library. Okay, so I think we need to clarify that. It's not that we've just moved them from one space to another. That's not what's transpired. So the rest of it, I think I'm gonna leave to you, Karen, if you can. I know you've made a lot of notes about things that you wanted to clarify and add, and maybe provide a little bit more history to how the
I
space was
can.
created.
I'm also cognizant of questions that people have, so just interrupt me or stop me. So community connections, I do want to emphasize, is first and foremost a library service. It is not in and of itself a safety measure, although it definitely has a positive impact on the safety culture within the building. And when I say safety culture, I mean the reality of a safe and welcoming space, and also people, staff, and the public, their perception of safety. So all of that is positively impacted by community connections. But there are versions of this type of service found in large urban library systems across Canada. Having a front and center information hub at a main downtown library branch is not an outlier concept. It is something that is being built into new designs, new downtown libraries that are being developed. It is not a space to sequester people who cannot or do not comply with our Library Services Code of Conduct. It is a space to provide library service, to spend significantly more time with people who have challenges navigating our systems. So if a person does not have a phone, a computer, access to the internet in their personal life, they require additional support in the library to access, fully access the resources. And that kind of time can be spent in community connections. It's also hopefully meant as and serves as a bridge for people to eventually use the entire facility of Millennium Library or branches. So if a staff person is meeting with someone in community connections and through conversation and interaction discovers they might have an interest in sewing machines or the sound booth in the makerspace on the third floor, they will help facilitate that kind of connection. So it is part of what we think is importantly a multifaceted approach to safety. So we do have contract security guards, contract community safety hosts, our own community crisis workers who are social workers, and of course our trained staff. So all of that working together, plus this dedicated space up front as people come into the library, where that additional time can be spent. And as has been said today, it does work to help de-escalate people who may be elevated in their response. But that said, the Code of Conduct applies to community connections as well. And that is our expectation. And I do want to say that, library services staff working at the public service desks on all 4 floors at Millennium Library and in the 19 other branches are absolutely skilled and experienced in delivering service to members of the public who present with a wide range of human behavior. So community connections is not about wanting a space to relegate people who may present difficult interactions. That's an accepted and understood aspect of library service. So in community connections, there was a full-time librarian, 3 part-time library service assistants, and 2 community crisis workers who are social workers. So those were all term positions that ended December 31st. And it is correct that we continue to have community safety hosts, 5 inside Millennium Library and 5 assigned at various branches. But the 2 who were dedicated to community connections, we don't have those any longer. So maybe I'll stop there for any questions. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Kilroy.
So, we have had to close down the library for a length of time due to staff concerns. And so I want to know and understand, do the staff want this open for do they feel that this, whether it's perceived, whether this is, I think we can all debate on, why it should be at the front and stuff like that, but do they support it being at the front? The staff want it at the front and continuing the services that it provides. Does that make them feel safer in their jobs?
There's approximately 130 people working in the facility, so I cannot say that there is unanimous support or opposition. It's going to be mixed. Many staff do understand the positive impact it has on safety, and part of the role of the community connections staff is to deliver internal training to staff working at all public service desks, just to share the knowledge that's been built up in that space about community referrals and increase their knowledge about community resources. And through that training, I think it's helped staff understand the role and purpose of community connections.
And I think that like the challenge with the Millennium Library, and this might be different at other libraries, is the how big it is, right? So that's why I see the Fourier being a very
Yes.
prime location, is because of how big it is. Is that something that you've had discussions about? Because I mean, I can see the community connection people working in other libraries that are much smaller, like people going in and getting that service there. But because of the proximity of the space and the corners and just challenges that the whole library presents, is it useful to have it at the front compared to inside the library?
It is, and it's useful for the full range of people who are coming in, and I'll just say specifically newcomers. And we see in particular many Ukrainian newcomers who make the library, many who make the library one of their first destinations after coming to the city. And they have, you know, a lot of paperwork, a lot of research, forms, things that they're looking to print and process. And the library is a stop for them to do that.
In terms of library services, because I think that that's a challenge for some counselors to like really understand how we're changing library services. And I don't think it's just a Winnipeg. I think that that's changing overall across the globe. Can you talk about how, like, again, why this is actually a library service and not necessarily, because I guess there's people wide up. The community, why is it tightly connected to the library services?
Right. So at the foundation, Public Library Service is striving to meet people where they are at when they come through the door and to meet their information needs as defined by the citizen themselves. So there's a reference interview, there's an interaction to discover what sort of information is needed. And whether a person is looking to put a hold on a bestseller novel or find out about available apartment listings, those are equally valid. So we know that there are some very traditional views about library service being a place to do homework, a place for story time, for book clubs, that kind of thing. But it's grown beyond that for many years. And places like Toronto Public Library have in-house settlement workers, for example. That's not a new thing. We've had a social worker at the library since 2012. If our goal is to increase access to this resource, we have to look for opportunities to help people for whom our system, our facilities might present barriers.
And just lastly, can you talk, because I did find out that we actually went and presented on this. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I share at the meetings of the Canadian Urban Library Council, who are the leaders of urban library systems across the country. I share about our successes with the Community Safety Host Program. And later this month at the Ontario Library Association Conference, I'll be presenting about working with Persons Community Solutions and the Community Safety Host Program, because we were involved from the beginning of that program and provided library locations for training for their first cohort. So other library systems are very interested. Most work with contract security guards and are looking for other facets to improve that approach to safety. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one question. I don't necessarily feel that it is a library's job, but unless we're expanding the rules of our libraries, as in it's not necessarily just a library now, it's going to become kind of a social service type of building where people go in for numerous things, not just for books. Am I correct in?
Well, it I guess depends on what a person's view of what a library is or should be. I made the comparison between, you know, looking for a bestseller versus looking for a place to live. You could also look at, you know, I've been with the library nearly 4 decades. One of our most popular questions is how to write a resume, how to look for a job, with a resume. Maybe not so much with the internet, but you know, those books circulated very highly, and that was a constant question. So what's that? What has that evolved to today? Today, it's helping the person, you know, use a computer to build a resume, and also hosting the different agencies that was mentioned earlier today too. So we're not providing ID for people with ID clinics or doing income tax assistance. We're hosting visiting agencies on a rotating basis to help with that. We're providing space.
I can see that in the future. We'll be kind of doing everything.
Well, we are doing that now.
I mean, the federal and the provincial government should be footing the
And
bill
we've
for
met-
this.
we
My
met with the province and shared what is being done in community connections. We've taken those steps.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Any other questions? Councilor Laura? No, okay. I think I'm just pulling up the motion here. The issue is, at the end of the day, is the language here refers it to the 2025 budget update process. Process is over. I think we're aware of that. Like next week, we're,
No, the process is not over until we vote on it.
okay,
And so so like the budget working group and APC should have a right to see this and understand that this is something that is being requested of the community, and then their decision is from there, whether that gets included in that. But the process is not over until we actually vote on it at council, so I disagree with you on that.
okay,
This is, we're in the process right now.
right, okay. I guess maybe then I'll go to the clerk for some clarification, because that's not my understanding.
Okay, so if the committee today were to approve in the recommendation of the City Center Community Committee, what will happen is this particular motion will be added to Wednesday's agenda under the budget review section. Okay, at that meeting, if this committee wants to include this into the budget, we will have to recommend to EPC that the preliminary budget be amended accordingly, and that item on Wednesday will then be received as information. This will simply serve as kind of a reminder for Wednesday's meeting, for the lack of a better term. If the committee wants to do anything else with this at this time, that's also possible, but that would perhaps be something like receive as information or refer it to the 2026 budget, whatever the case may be.
Okay. And remind me again, it says funding be restored to the community connection space. I heard a number 614 was floated around. What's,
I think I'd say,
The cost for 2024.
yeah, 641, no,
614 is what people are saying, but yeah.
That was the
628.
2024, so the forecast for 25 is 628.
628.
okay. And that's for the,
They would have to find 628,000 more in this upcoming budget.
okay,
Or they could cut something else and add this in, like, you know, but that would be up to the budget working group and EPC basically to find those dollars.
So just to clarify, so the work of the budget working group at this point has concluded. The work of the budget working group is to make up the budget. So now any recommendations that comes forward from this committee to EPC will be up to EPC to make a recommendation on the council.
Okay.
So I'll move it forward. I'm hoping my council colleagues will agree with me that this should be looked at and reviewed. And I guess I'll leave it at that. I think this is an important service, and I don't believe that I've been there and witnessed myself, so I wish that others maybe have had the same opportunities to maybe see that. But I am worried that if we don't have this, that, you know, we can have similar instances where we close our libraries again. But I've been there where it's been de-escalated before things hit the library. I think that is a very complex library in terms of in terms of its service delivery, not every library provides the level of service, but also how big the library is. And what staff would have to do if we were to close this and manage kind of what could particularly happen in that space. And also just the level of new immigrants that I know are using this facility and how daunting that is when you don't speak the language, when you don't really understand, if you've never had libraries before. That space is there to really help understand how you use a library and how you get the supports you need out of a library. And we do have lots of books in other languages. And so you want to encourage people to access our library services. And with having the people that have the skill set there, the library staff there, it really enables them to do that. So I don't know the backgrounds of what was discussed in other meetings with the province or the feds, but I do think this is a very, very valuable services and I think we provide other services, I think, that maybe aren't as valuable that, if we are spending money someplace else, we can maybe it's not an actual add-on cost. Maybe we're looking at decreasing money in other service areas to ensure that we are providing the support here. So that's what I'm bringing, but those are discussions I think EPC would have to have because they know the internal budget more than I would, so.
Okay.
Just thinking about in the past, we've debated these at the budget meeting,
Mhm.
which we're gonna have, 5 days?
Wednesday.
Do we not have the conversation? Should we have a conversation?
Well, that's what I'm asking for it to move forward.
Yeah, the conversation will happen next week, the debate.
For Wednesday, and then we
For
decide what
Wednesday,
to
yeah.
send up to ABC, right?
Yeah,
And after we get a little more glimpse of what the overall budget looks like.
yeah. So I'm at a kind of a challenging juncture where I see some value in the program and value in also listening to some of the other members who don't disagree, who disagree with the program. So I like to find a balanced approach, a solution. I don't honestly see anything in front of me that appeases my mind with a balanced approach. I'm not for or against, I'm for and against it right now. So nobody's come up with a solution except to continue to fund it. And we know money is tight right now, $650,000 to cut something else out. Is not what I want to hear.
Dollars, we could be relining road dollars, we could be relining downtown safety partnership dollars,
Sure.
But we need to know and understand, we need it to be part of that budget process in order for this to even continue that discussion. So that's what this is asking, just to allow this to be continued in discussions with the people, the standing policy chairs, they're at the table that can make those kind of second look at this.
I'm totally fine with continuing on the discussion. The challenge I have is, finding the money and what are we going to cut to support community connections. So I think, obviously, those are going to be the heavy discussions we'll have at EPC and further on. And I'm fine with, go ahead,
Just for
Councilor.
that, if we don't make a decision on this today, I'm almost certain we will have it next week. The same conversation.
Yeah, it'll be the same discussions and probably more delegation to come out.
But the delegations will likely be there, whether this is on the agenda or not.
I don't know.
Okay, the motion before the committee for consideration now is whether or not you want to talk about this on Wednesday or not.
Yeah, because it's not in the budget. Community connection space is not in the budget, so would not be discussed next week.
It's not on the list.
Well, no,
But it could be discussed as not being there.
Yeah,
I speak in the budget because this is not there.
correct,
Yeah,
correct,
it just wouldn't be specifically a line item
correct.
outside of the budget.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense too. Yeah.
And of course, I think I'm kind of clear in that it's a great idea. However, I think we're doing the creep a little bit too far. call it, I was gonna say budget creep, but that's not the exact word. It's something I feel that the other levels of government should be taking on. If they're not, I don't know if we can afford to go down that road.
Yeah, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the conversation has been had and the province is not interested in funding it. So that's the challenge we're at right now, is the province is not interested in funding it. And then it begs the question, if the province is not interested in funding it, why is the city of Winnipeg should be funding it? That's also another kind of difficult question to ask, and nobody has the answer to that one either.
Well, I have the answer because it's a library service, like it's our, why would we ask the province to fund something that we should be doing and providing? Like, so we're information, we provide information to people, whether we have that space or not, they're gonna be doing that work.
So with the extended library hours and the hiring of other library staff, remind me again, how come we couldn't use that money then?
So the FTEs that were funded, incremental FTEs to support the expansion of
Library hours, yeah.
That's in place. That started on Labor Day. So there are no FTEs to pull into community connections. I will say, agree or disagree, it is correct that the same people will attend Millennium Library, same members of the public, with the same needs for information. And so we're not going to turn people away. We're going to try and meet their information needs. But the challenge will be, and the capacity question will be, can't spend half an hour with somebody when there's a lineup at the reader services desk. It just can't. It just can't work. And that's what Community Connections was able to provide, was that individual attention and support.
And I just want to also add that the additional hours that were provided through the library service, a lot of that was provided from an increase from the province for the provincial library grant.
So they are putting money into it. Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, we do get an annual
Grant,
provincial library grant, and we
It's about $1 million more increase with the new formula.
Oh. Okay, so they are funding it.
well, they're funding a portion of whatever, the whole library service. They don't earmark their funds for anything particular, other than that the new formula, you'll have to correct me, is based on a certain percentage of.
It's 15% of whatever we spent the previous year on staffing and materials acquisition, plus 10,000 for each credentialed library. So the more the city invests in staffing and materials, the greater the grant the following year. Yeah, and there's a cap.
There's a cap, but we haven't reached that cap.
No, but it won't take long. There was a big catch up this time.
Okay. Well, I'm on the fence, so it's gonna put everybody on the hot seat. I'm either or. It's, the debate's gonna happen anyways next week, whether we have this go forward or not. So I think the challenge is funding it, finding the money and cutting something else out, which I'm not supportive of. So we would have to find extra money else, like extra operating dollars, because I'm not in the position to cut anything. I never want to cut anything.
Right, and I'm in a challenging situation as I'm not part of the budget working group or EPC. And I do believe it kind of falls on EPC to make these decisions at the end of the day. Before it hits council, that's the way it's been set up, and mayor.
Yeah.
So I do think that, but they're on the hook for figuring this out, and I think that they need to at least have the discussion. I think this is here to ask them to rethink this, reevaluate this, and have the discussion. And if we don't move it forward, then we're not saying we don't want them to have the discussion. And I think they should have the discussion. If the final decision is no, but let's let EPC have the discussion. they make the big bucks, they sit in these chairs, they should be, you know, but we should allow that.
Speaking from somebody who also sat on EPC too.
Yeah, exactly. So I know how this works, Councilor Santos. So I do believe that this is appropriate. I think this should move forward. I think the community has asked for it to move forward. And at the end of the day, if EPC sits there in a group, they know where the budget is best, because they're the chairs of those committees. If that's decided at then you know, but at least let the community that has come out and spoken to this allow this to go further to that group to review this. That's my argument. But I guess we've argued it already, so, yeah.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of Councillor Gilroy's motion?
Aye.
And those opposed?
I,
Aye.
Okay. She's lost. I tried.
You've been very good job.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, Nature Smart Climate Solutions Fund. At the budget working group. Oh, here we go. Yes, Dave Donkey.
So this is essentially the same process as the previous one. If the committee agrees with the city center community committee.
Okay, there's a sidebar conversation happening here. Hold on. There's a sidebar conversation happening and the clerk is speaking.
Yep,
Go
so
ahead.
just for committee's consideration, so this is the same as the previous item. If we concur in the city center community committee recommendation, then this will be added to Wednesday's budget meeting for further discussion.
All right, so Dave, yeah, you guys have questions?
I have one question.
One question.
No
Okay, we'll
dollar
go.
value. Cost to have it allocate money to the 2025, 2026, how much?
I think that I can speak to this because I think it's up to what we can afford, basically. But I don't even know if we're like, are we already doing this? Like, are we applying for this money already? There's money sitting there. But again, this is a cross-department one. There could be other departments that could be chipping in for this. So are you aware of any like meetings regarding trying to access this money?
So let me just say the climate action plan, the urban forest strategy, the park strategy, the recreation strategy, they're all quite integrated with each other and what they try to do and try to achieve. You know, as far as looking at the climate action strategy, like there's no funding for purchasing a land, but all the objectives are the same. You know, we're all trying to preserve and maintain parks at the end of the day. You know, I've reached out to Water and Waste to see if they have funding. I'm not expecting a positive answer on that because we're talking millions of dollars, of course, here for the purchase of land. But I want to assure you that we do work together on these plans and objectives and bring them forward as best as possible.
I want it to be I do want to make it clear that it isn't just about purchasing of land. Like I know that the mayor had talked about trees in his motion and there's more money for trees. Like, could we not be accessing this funding for like as part of that? I'm just worried that there's money sitting at the table and we're not accessing it when we're actually spending the dollars. Like it could be sitting there in our budget, but nobody's applied for the application as well. So I guess I'm asking questions around that because I have a concern that we haven't accessed this money yet. We're buying trees, we are looking at land.
There's two streams to this funding. One is restoration and one is acquisition of land. We've had a working group that's been trying to identify sources for funding within the public service. And we haven't had any great amounts of funding that has been able to be applied for. So at the end of the day, we don't have, the millions of dollars required in order to be able to match the funding. Because really, we met with the Nature Smart people and they said, hey, if you got matching funding, it's much more assured to be approved, right? And we have to 2025 and 2026 to apply. We've got the application. We haven't applied yet. So that's where we're at.
So like what kind of funding, like, so if we allocated, like, say, $1 million out of the citywide LDR, like, what could that give us in terms of, like, have we had those discussions?
So we have with council, brought forward that the use, and as Erna suggested, LDR could be, or a portion of LDR.
Gas tax.
Could be, or gas tax, could be, used to match this funding. So how serious is those discussions? Certainly, we're promoting them. There's been some discussions, but, really the budget's set at this point in time. And any feedback I'm getting is that, that there's not funding available for this initiative at this time. Which is not what I want to hear, and I don't think it's what you want to hear either.
Like, I don't understand how we cannot have any projects that couldn't qualify for this funding I'm having, because we're looking at restoration. Okay, so then maybe, because I know just from the last vote, there's no, my colleagues aren't supportive of doing much change. Can we look at 2026 and having them come back at some projects that we could look at for the 2026 budget to try to even access some of this funding?
The funding's not going away anytime soon, right? There's many opportunities to apply.
It's first come, first serve in the years of 2025 and 2026. So the funding is evaporating away as we speak for projects, but there may be some left.
How do you report back on some funding? Like, I know it'd be a decision of council, whether it's LDR or I think through our trees, I don't really understand this is my first time on this committee, but we're talking about restorations. We're looking at restorations of parks all the time. Could you come back with us with some things that we could maybe look at as a council in terms of some funding that we could do, whether it's our LDR or even
Someone mentioned gas tax.
gas tax, yeah. Well, that usually goes into our roads, right?
It does go.
So I think our gas tax should be actually used for this, right? But I think that's gonna have to be an argument at council, but maybe our administration can come back and allow us to have that argument for the 2026 budget. Cause I know I'm not gonna get it passed with my council colleagues on the table today, I don't think. So.
Certainly, we can report on that if that's the will of this committee. I think that's a wise choice, given what's before you. There's a lot of difficult choices in council about budgeting. You just dealt with an item like that. So certainly we can look at that and propose different funding sources, and see what could be done.
And maybe some projects that you could think we could.
Yeah. Now, that does bring the issue of what we really need, in my opinion, is a long-term plan for acquisition of parklands. And a funding source for it, and something that's likely in camera to adjust to or to deal with the issues that Councillor Lard was speaking to. When we get into these more difficult land acquisitions as being dealt with in LeMay, for example, now I think the public service and
by the time it gets started, the price goes up.
Yeah, council can, there's a number one, there's a lot of good developers that are willing to do some work. They know that in some neighborhoods, they want to keep the trees, that they want to not develop them, right? So there are some good developers out there that are more sensitive towards that end of the spectrum, So what this long-term plan is, if we had a funding source, maybe a long-term funding source, that we could acquire some funding. There's another dozen properties right now that we would like to acquire, on top of the two that those are the two best ones. Some and LeMay were the two best ones. There's no doubt about it. There's not a lot of these properties left in the entire city. So where there's natural environment. So it's really a multi-generational sort of decisions for council
So
to.
this is kind of building on that 12 million that we're supposed to be putting into kind of the acquisition.
Well, that's what we'd be using.
You'll maybe come back to us with some funding sources that we could maybe look at, have a debate. We're not all gonna agree on where we should take the money and put it towards maybe the next year's budget. We can maybe, I don't know, hopefully if this money does go, there'll be a new set of money, but at least we all have something that we've kind of debated as a committee, right?
Yeah, I think that might be the best. I guess the other question that we have to do to look at clerks with is which committee this lies in at the end of the day, because LDR is actually a PP&D function, and acquisition of land is actually a PP&D function. And I've been caught in this a couple of times, and certainly I'm willing to work with anyone towards this particular goal.
Well, I was at P&D and I was sent here. Seriously.
You were not sent here.
No,
That's not the
okay.
case.
I was on
Your
P&D
priorities have changed.
and I'm now here.
Yes.
And at P&D, I was told there was a report coming and wait till that time, and then I can start talking about tree land expropriations and using.
Now you're here and they're telling you they're perfect.
And using the building bylaw, which has language about vegetation inside of it, after I tried to nominate some cottonwoods on parkland in St. Boniface and failed the vote. Surely there has to be a way. If we have functional designs for roads, why can't we have functional designs for trees? Why can't I blanket the entire city and say this city land is required for trees?
Well,
that may be for legal, and they'll say don't do it because, you know.
Or even just like legal, like this is one of the things that I'm kind of looking at too, is just the ability to say you cannot take down trees, like you can't. And then we require certain things through our planning that require us. And I think that there's a disconnect, and that's what I think Erna Buffy was stating. There is a disconnect between our planning documents and what we're allowing. Private trees, we need to be, some cities have really firmed up that they can't cut them down, right?
Why not ask for, why not require a development permit for any change in vegetation for which there is a caliper of more than this many inches, and in the case of conifers, anything more than 6 feet?
exactly the kind of thing that we're looking at. So there's another, so let's not get there's another initiative on tree protection.
This is what I was told last time.
And we have a report coming forward. One, and I believe that what we've worked out with clerks is that the public tree bylaw will come to this committee. The private tree bylaw will go to P&D, and they may come together in the same report. I don't know that quite yet because we haven't created, but that's another initiative rather than I don't want to get too far off the track because there's a plan for that, and you guys are going to see that very soon. You're going to see it in June, right? June.
I'm gonna write that
So
down.
let's get them the money, that they need. So
Write that down.
I'm gonna write it down.
So-
June
So I
2025.
guess that I'll move them, and Peter, you can maybe help me with this.
Yeah, can we move it in a motion so we
Yeah,
can
well,
get reminded?
okay, we can do that too.
Yeah.
That's good at that.
Because I wrote it down, that doesn't mean I'll put it in that.
But for this one here that we look at, that we have the, maybe the public service report back on, different mechanisms that the city has with their funding, like, and I'm thinking of whether it's gas tax or LVR or, within their, revenue streams that they already have, to look at how we can create from that, what's that, parks plan?
Park strategy.
To look at, I'm very bad at saying.
Acquisition of land
Yes,
from the park strategy.
yeah. So we can meet that 12 million that we have indicated that we need to deal with the addition of more park space prior to the 2026 budget.
It's over 10 years, that's not a lot of money.
Okay, so we're, instead of referring this to the budget, we're asking the public service to report back in perhaps 180 days.
Yeah.
On different funding opportunities available to the city to fund the park strategy, specifically the acquisition of land to establish new park space.
Yeah, that's
So we
right.
just put in there so that we can have it in time for the, hopefully in time for the 2026 budget. To remind us that we're looking at this so that we can hopefully get it added for the 2026 budget.
Well,
That's
that,
180 days.
yeah, 180 days is essentially 6 months from now. And it's a little bit difficult to put limits on the 2026 budget because I don't know
Okay,
when
then-
that is happening.
So then instead of 188 days, can I ask you to do it shorter?
We can try anything.
Okay.
I'm not willing to step in the batter's box and I'll let you know if I hit the ball, or you'll find out if I don't hit the ball.
Okay. Because we need to have a debate at council how we want to.
Say 150, that'll give you around May, June.
Good.
100, just say 150 days and then.
150 days.
Okay. Okay, so reread it again.
All right, so the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services directs the Winnipeg Public Service to report back in 150 days on funding opportunities available to the city to fund the park strategy, land acquisition to establish new park space.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Maybe restoration and acquisition.
Restoration.
Add restoration in there too, because there might be some opportunities to some land maybe to restore it, so that we can put it back into, if we plant a forest on it tomorrow, it'll be a forest in 25 years. Yeah.
Right.
Good. All right. What's 150 days? What month is that? June?
May, June, yeah.
Boom. All right. All those in favor of amending the motion?
All right.
Add skill work. Okay. I think I heard Matt say aye.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You said, yeah,
Okay,
okay.
good.
Aye.
That's passed unanimously. Thank you. Good work.
All right.
And I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor by Councilor Lard,
Aye.
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 adjourned at 1:11.
Aye.
Thank you.